Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Wednesday, December 18th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 439 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. We have a very special show today. We're going to answer some of your questions, and we're also going to have a challenge to raise support for the Electronic Intifada's work over the coming year. And we have a few gifts as well. And later on in the program, of course, Jon will cover the latest resistance news from Gaza, including the battle in eastern Rafah and another complex ambush in the Jabalia refugee camp. But first, here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments in this week in Gaza and the West Bank. This photo of Jabalia camp shows the extent of the last 14 months of genocide and the more than 70 days of relentless, targeted obliteration of North Gaza. Israel's campaign of systematic slaughter, forced displacement, destruction, starvation, airstrikes, and massacres continue across all areas of the coastal enclave. In North Gaza, Israel's attacks on Beit Lahia on Tuesday killed at least 8 Palestinians who were sheltering in a home near the Kamal Adwan hospital. The near-daily attacks on the hospital itself have escalated this past week, with the hospital's director, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, reporting that debris and explosions are shattering doors and windows, and Israeli attacks have damaged water tanks, the electricity generators, and the oxygen supply network. The United Nations reported that due to ongoing insecurity and the lack of ambulances and equipment, medical staff at Kamal Adwan Hospital have generally been unable to assist people trapped under the rubble in the surrounding areas or have themselves been hit. On December 12th, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza announced that Dr. Saeed Joda, the last orthopedic doctor in North Gaza, was killed while en route from Kamal Adwan to the nearby Al-Aqsa hospital to treat patients. A nurse, Kerem Jadadat, was also killed the same day while traveling to Kamal Adwan. The health ministry said that Dr. Joda was injured 2 weeks ago, but he continued to treat patients. His nephew was killed last month. This video shows Dr. Joda grieving his nephew in the hospital. In a report issued this week, Euromed Human Rights Monitor stated that Dr. Joda was shot in the head by an Israeli quadcopter drone. His killing, they say, demonstrated that it was a premeditated and deliberate murder, especially, quote, given that he was the only orthopedic physician in the northern Gaza Strip. Euromed added, quote, the few medical teams that have remained in northern Gaza are being targeted by the Israeli occupation army in a methodical, obvious, and recurring pattern. This makes it extremely difficult to provide medical care to the tens of thousands of residents who have been under siege for the last 11 weeks. The human rights group added that the number of Palestinian medical personnel who have been killed since October 7th, 2023 is 1,057, and more than 135 scientists and academics have also been killed. Over the weekend, the World Health Organization and its partners reached Kamal Adwan Hospital to deliver essential supplies. The head of the WHO said that fuel, food, and medicine were delivered, and they were able to transfer a few patients and their companions to Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Kamal Adwan Hospital is still without specialized physicians for surgical and maternal care. The conditions, the WHO head stated, are, quote, simply appalling. The hospital's director, Dr. Abu Safia, said that on Monday, Israeli snipers had targeted the intensive care unit and destroyed all the windows, forcing medical staff to treat patients in the hallways. And this morning, a fire broke out in the intensive care unit due to heavy Israeli fire on the hospital. Dr. Abu Safia recorded this video from the ICU at Kamal Adwan Hospital under intense smoke and destruction. A small group of civil defense workers announced that they were resuming operations in Jabalia after more than 60 days of being prevented from working by the Israeli army. The civil defense team said that, quote, following the arrest of 10 team members, the Palestinian civil defense has resumed operations in Jabalia with renewed determination. The team is fully prepared and ready to continue their mission of saving lives and serving the community. Salute to everybody, they said. On Sunday, December 15th, the Israeli military carried out a massacre on displaced Palestinian families sheltering at the Khalil Aweda school in Beit Hanun, in the northernmost area of the Gaza Strip. The Gaza government media office said that at least 43 people were killed. According to the United Nations, at least 10 people were burned alive. Israeli soldiers detained male Palestinians and forced women and children to move southwards. Eyewitnesses told the Palestinian civil defense that they saw decomposing bodies in the alleys and streets, and that several inhabited houses near the school were subjected to heavy shelling. People reported hearing cries of others who were trapped under the rubble. The school had housed about 1,500 displaced persons. Israel attacked another school shelter on Saturday, December 14th, in western Gaza City. Hossam Shabat, one of the few surviving journalists working in North Gaza, reported from the scene. On the same day, Israeli forces bombed a home in Shujaiya, northern Gaza City, killing at least 6 people. Israeli armed quadcopter drones opened fire at a group of people in the Shati, or beach refugee camp northwest of Gaza City, on Monday, tearing their bodies apart, according to reporters. Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud said that, quote, the Israeli military uses drones packed with little pieces of metals that fly at such a high speed that when they explode, they cut through the flesh and cause severe bleeding. In central Gaza, the Israeli army committed a series of massacres in so-called humanitarian safe zones. On Monday, Israeli forces besieged Al-Mawasi, an area on the southern coastal sand dunes where Palestinians have been forcibly displaced. Doctors Without Borders reported that 12 of their team members and their families were surrounded by bombing and heavy shootings in their homes, while more than 30 others were trapped in the group's office. A staff member stated, quote, tanks were invading the area where we live. It was terrifying. We were lying on the ground in our homes for hours, and it seemed like the gunfire was coming directly towards us. Israeli forces bombed the municipal building of the city of Deir Balah, killing the city's mayor, Dr. Diab Ali Al-Jarou, along with a group of city employees and residents on Saturday, December 14th. Our contributor Abu Bakr Abed reported from the scene of the attack in its aftermath.
Targeted area is in the open market where hundreds of people, but maybe thousands of people do usually gather. So that's why the attack has been devastating and claimed the lives of so many people and wounded several others, many others as even. And I can see just around me, as you can see, probably 3 up to 4 ambulances, have just arrived, and many have reached the hospital just during the past few minutes, and it just keeps going on like this. This is a safe humanitarian zone according to the Israeli military, but you can see just intensified attacks on Deir al-Balah, and just the initial report we have so far is 7 people killed, many injuries, but yes, just the pickup trucks, the other civilian cars, and the ambulances are still going to the hospital, rushing to the hospital, holding and transferring many casualties.
That was Abu Bakr Abed reporting from Deir al-Balah. On Sunday, December 15th, Israel bombed field headquarters for the civil defense in nearby Nuseirat, killing 4 high-level staff and volunteer rescue workers. It was one of several consecutive massacres in and around Nuseirat that day. The Gaza government media office said that a residential area in Nuseirat refugee camp killed more than 30 Palestinians. Another bombing was reported in Burej refugee camp. Also on Sunday, Israel bombed the Ahmed bin Abdulaziz school, a UN school which has sheltered displaced people near the Nasser medical complex in Khan Yunis. The UN stated that within minutes, Nasser's emergency department was flooded with casualties, most of them women and children. Many were severely injured and died on site or en route to the hospital. In testimonies collected by Medical Aid for Palestinians, which operates at Nasser Medical Complex, a physician stated, quote, "We received a huge number of casualties. The emergency department was full of women, children, and elderly patients with severe injuries. I lost count of the number of patients that came in with injuries I've never seen in my entire career. I counted at least 18 victims who died in the emergency department. Of these, there were 12 children under the age of 12 years old." The very first patient that came in, the physician said, was a 3-year-old girl who had the left side of her forehead torn open by shrapnel fragments that had penetrated her skull. Due to the limited amount of painkillers and anesthetics that we had available, we had to undertake the procedure in the emergency room with very little access to medications. Early this morning, Wednesday, the Samir Project, a local aid group, reported that an airstrike had hit a tent encampment adjacent to their Rifat al-Arir camp in Deir Balah. At least 2 people were killed, according to reports. The Samir Project stated, quote, "Nowhere in Gaza is safe. This sobering reminder was felt by the families in our camp. The missile could be heard swirling down before impact. Imagine not knowing where it will land, what it will destroy, how many will be massacred. Little Mimi, a pediatric cardiac patient who needs open-heart surgery, was terrified. This is the horrific reality that children and adults contend with daily, indiscriminate bombing and carnage caused by the occupation. Thank you to the staff and all the members of the camp who are now family with one another, who provided comfort. But it leaves the question, what's next? Where is the next target? Who are the next to suffer? Ceasefire now." A recent study based on data collected in June by several international human rights groups, including War Child Alliance, was published this week, revealing that of the children in the surveyed households where at least one child is injured, disabled, unaccompanied, or separated from parents, 96% of those children felt that their death was imminent. 49% of the surveyed children expressed a desire to die. The study also found that 92% of children were not accepting reality, 83% experienced severe fear, and 73% exhibited aggressive behavior, with many more showing signs of withdrawal and anxiety, alongside a pervasive sense of hopelessness. Israel killed 4 journalists in Gaza this week. The Gaza government media office says that the number of reporters and media workers who have been killed since October 2023 now stands at 196. Ahmed Bakr al-Luh, a cameraman for Al Jazeera, was killed in a bombing in Nuseirat on Sunday. According to the network, he was killed while covering rescue operations by the civil defense crews in the aftermath of an earlier bombing, and was wearing his press vest and helmet. His home, where he lived with his wife and family, was, quote, utterly destroyed by Israel in a bombing in Nuseirat camp just days before. Mohammed Jabr al-Qarnawi, a correspondent for Sanad news agency, was killed along with his wife and 3 children in an Israeli bombing of Burej refugee camp also on Sunday. And Mohammed Balusha, who worked for the Al-Mashhad satellite channel, was killed on Saturday in a drone attack in Gaza City. Balusha was the reporter who first discovered the tiny, decomposed corpses of premature babies at Al-Nasser Pediatric Hospital in late November 2023. The babies had been left to die, cold, hungry, alone, and in pain over a period of 17 days, after Israeli forces ordered hospital staff to leave the facility. As we reported at the time, the parents of the fragile newborns were apparently told by the Israeli military that the Red Cross would evacuate their babies safely, according to testimonies, but that did not happen. Balusha was shot in the thigh by an Israeli sniper a month later while he was reporting in Jabalia refugee camp. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, he lost consciousness for about 30 minutes before being revived by the nuzzling of cats he had been feeding before he was shot. Al-Mashhad TV said that Israeli forces blocked ambulances from reaching him, delaying his transfer to hospital for treatment. Al Jazeera stated that after surviving the sniper attack, Balusha continued reporting on the war for months, despite his injuries, before he was killed in an Israeli drone attack in Gaza City on Saturday. On December 11th, journalist Iman Hatem Al-Shanti, who was a broadcaster for Sawt Al-Aqsa radio, was killed in an Israeli bombing of a residential apartment in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood of Gaza City, along with her son and other relatives. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight excerpts of this one by Asim Al-Nabih, an engineer and PhD researcher currently based in North Gaza. He serves as the spokesperson for Gaza municipality. In this achingly beautiful feature, Asim writes about Gaza's suffering, inviting us to ask, how do Palestinians respond to devastation with resilience rather than despair? Quote, attitudes toward death and sacrifice play an essential role in Gaza's resilience. Here, death really is a constant companion. Yet it is not viewed as an ending, but as a continuation of a larger struggle. Suffering in this worldview becomes a portal to another realm, where the values and principles people live for persist. The sacrifices we make are not in vain. They are for something far greater, a future in which justice, dignity, and humanity triumph. Resistance in Gaza is not merely a physical struggle. It is also a spiritual and philosophical act. It transcends the immediate physical pain and confronts the existential questions of what it means to live and die under oppression. Our rejection of submission to tyranny represents a collective affirmation of life, of dignity, and of refusing to let our humanity be extinguished. Even in the darkest moments, when death looms large and life seems precarious, Palestinians in Gaza continue to fight. We rebuild what is destroyed, bury our dead, and wake each day to an uncertain future. In doing so, we assert something profound, that our existence is more than just a series of tragedies. Our defiance, our survival, our resistance all speak to a deeper truth, that life, in all its pain and beauty, is worth defending. This is the purpose of Gaza's suffering. Like Prometheus's stolen fire, it is a gift not only for us, but for the world. Our endurance lights the path for those who face similar struggles, reminding us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there is always hope. The resistance of Gaza is the embodiment of a powerful rejection. It is a refusal to accept injustice and subjugation, and a call for the world to recognize that freedom and dignity are worth every sacrifice. In the end, Gaza's suffering is not without purpose. It is the flame that continues to burn, lighting the way forward, even when all else seems lost. Those are excerpts from When Suffering Becomes an Affirmation of Life by Asim Al-Nabih on electronicintifada.net. And turning to the occupied West Bank, my colleague Tamara Nassar published 2 reports for us this week on how the Palestinian Authority is, as she writes, quote, demonstrating its value and proving loyalty to its Israeli and American masters through a deadly military operation in the northern occupied West Bank city of Jenin. Tamara wrote over the weekend that, quote, the Palestinian Authority recently launched a deadly military operation in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin and its refugee camp, assassinating a member of an armed group on Saturday and killing both a Palestinian teen and a child. Anwar Rajab, the spokesperson of the PA security forces, claimed the military operation, dubbed Operation Protect the Homeland, was intended to put an end to sedition and chaos The New York Times reported a euphemism for the PA doing Israel's bidding by targeting armed Palestinian groups resisting Israel's land grabs and military occupation. Rajab called this a new stage where PA forces aim to regain control of the Jenin camp from lawbreakers who ruined the lives of the citizenry amid a campaign of killings and arrests. PA forces invaded Jenin with armored vehicles on Saturday, killing 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, a member of the Jenin Brigade, a group associated with Saraya al-Quds, the military wing of Islamic Jihad. More than 20 Palestinians have been injured in the Israeli-style military raid since December 14th. Tamara adds that, quote, intensified PA aggression in Jenin sparked widespread unrest, with calls for the dismantling of the collaboration body. A member of the PA forces resigned from his position and publicly disavowed the body following the killing of al-Shalabi, taking off his uniform. On Tuesday, Tamara updated the developing story. Quote, since the military operation began, PA forces have occupied the Jenin government hospital, cut off electricity and water to the camp, shot and killed 2 youths in addition to a member of the armed resistance, creating a state of fear and uncertainty in the camp. Schools have been closed in the area, with students shifting to virtual learning. Jenin residents have observed a camp-wide strike for the 4th day in a row to protest the PA's incursion. UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, has been forced to suspend its operations in the area. The Palestinian Authority operation is being carried out with full coordination with Israel, Hebrew media has reported. PA security chiefs even met with Michael Fenzel, a U.S. lieutenant general who oversees so-called security ties between Israel and the Palestinians, ahead of the operation to go over planning details. The PA officials handed Fenzel a detailed list of weaponry needed to intensify their offensive against Palestinians, Axios reported. The U.S. is now asking Israel to authorize the transfer of weapons to the PA, ensuring it can continue carrying out Israel's dirty work. For much more on this story, read Tamara Nassar's recent reports, Palestinian Authority does Israel's bidding in Jenin, and Palestinian Authority proves loyalty to U.S. Israel by attacking Jenin, on electronicintifada.net. And finally, as we always do, we wanted to share images of people expressing defiance and resilience in the face of Israel's campaign of destruction. This video, reposted by Translating Palestine and Eye on Palestine, shows a man in North Gaza emerging from beneath the rubble of a recent bombing, emerging alive and relatively unharmed. He says that this is the second time that this has happened to him. He had been healing from a previous injury that has left him with a colectomy, but he thanked God for his survival. Praise God, we're steadfast here, he says.
الحمد لله الحمد لله تحت القاعدة طلعنا ها الحمد لله وبتصاوب كمان ها طلع بتصاوب قبل هيك كولوستومي كمان الحمد لله
يعني اصابتين
الحمد لله صابدين يا عم صابدين
وطالع بتضحك بالله من بعد.
الحمد لله صابدين.
هذا طلع نجا بعجوبة سبحان الله. ثاني إصابة.
Maha Husseini, a researcher with Euromed Human Rights Monitor who has been on this live stream before, posted this photo of sprouting seedlings that her mother planted. Maha writes, quote, known for her love of food, my mom used to delight in inviting people over, showing off her cooking skills, and serving a variety of delicious dishes. But for 14 months now, she hasn't been able to eat most of the food she loved, including green beans. Since the first day of its genocide, the Israeli occupation has made it clear that it aims to create inhumane conditions in Gaza by cutting off food, water, and medicine to the already 17-year blockaded strip. A few weeks ago, a friend of my mother's gave her a few beans to plant, something my mom used to do often when we were home in Gaza City. She loved planting vegetables on our balcony, including small cherries, mint, and basil. I can't describe the joy on her face as she asked me to fill the plastic pot with sand from outside our shelter, even before her friend had left. I brought the pot filled with sand, and she carefully wet the sand, gently pushing each bean into it while talking about how she would cook the first green beans to bloom. This morning, as I was leaving the shelter for work, I noticed the pot outside the door. It had turned a vibrant green, with the stems swaying in the wind, reaching out in every direction. These two toddlers rejoiced at the sight of a few eggs, which have become a precious and scarce commodity in North Gaza. And finally, our contributor Abu Bakr Abed posted this photo of himself washing his t-shirt and his little niece coming to play with him. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Asa Winstanley, and Jon Elmer. Hi, everyone. Ali, let's talk a little bit about the structure of the show today and what will be coming up for our audience. Oh, you're muted, Ali.
Yeah, well, it's only been 439 days, and I still muting myself. Thank you, Nora, for that news, and it's just as devastating as ever. And, you know, I wake up more mornings thinking, how are we going to keep going? And then I see people in Gaza keep going. And that's what gets me out of bed every day. And we will stay here for them all the way through. And so, Nora, why don't you tell us what we're going to do today?
Well,
we're going to have a special show. It's a bit of a different format, and we're trying something new. And if people like it, maybe we'll do it again one day. We'll see.
Yeah, I think people will like it. I think it's a great way to get to know our audience a little bit more and to have more of an open discussion amongst ourselves. We're going to answer some of your questions. We're also going to have a challenge to raise support for the Electronic Intifada's work over the coming year. And we have a few gifts we'll show you in a few minutes. Over the last 15 months, you've helped to make this live stream a premier source of reporting, analysis, and interviews about the situation in Palestine, starting from our very first program on October 9th, 2023. And our very first guest, our dear friend, Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, who was murdered by Israel less than 2 months later. During this time, a remarkable thing has happened. We've become a virtual community, helping to sustain one another through these absolutely horrific times. And so today's show is also about saying thank you to each and every person watching. My colleagues and I are grateful for the countless emails, notes, and comments telling us what this live stream means to you, for your suggestions and your questions, which we'll get to in a bit. We're truly touched and honored, very moved by all the messages that we get. And as much as we may help to sustain you, you help to keep us going day after day, week after week. And so we thank you. Since the start of this genocide, we've been fortunate to speak to extraordinary experts on this live stream, including Ahmed Abu Foul, Susan Akram, Leila Al-Arian, Helena Cobbin, Chris Gunness, Shir Hever, Rania Khalek, Michael Link, Mohammed Marandi, Joseph Massad, John Mearsheimer, Craig Mokhyber, Abdeljawad Omar, and Ilan Pape. We've heard from doctors who shared their firsthand experiences of working in Gaza during the genocide, including Tahir Ahmed, Ipengi, and Tarek Lubani. We've also spoken with activists organizing to end the genocide, including Hatem Aboudeya, Huda Amori, and Hazami Barnada, among many others who are working for justice and liberation in Palestine. We've also, of course, been able to speak to people in and from Gaza, including Shahid Abu Salama, Donya Ahmed Abu Sitta, Ahmed Al-Naouk, Haider Eid, Leila Al-Haddad, Maha Husseini, Hind Al-Qudari, Ahmed Masood, Asil Musa, Abdallah Al-Nami, Wala Sabah, Ahmed As-Samak, and Abu Bakr Abed, among so many others. And overall, we've produced some 200 hours of programming that continues to educate people about the situation in Palestine all over the world, not just on YouTube, but on other platforms as well. And we will keep doing it. Of course, the live stream is only part of what we do. The Electronic Intifada's reportage and investigative journalism has played a major role in debunking Israel's atrocity propaganda, especially its fabrications about burned babies and mass rapes, as well as exposing how Israel killed many, if not most, of its own people on October 7th. I think one of the most important contributions we make is publishing the incredible reporting and personal testimonies by our writers in Gaza, which we regularly feature on this live stream. Of course, you can read them all at electronicintifada.net. And all this work and so much more is only possible thanks to the support of individuals like me and you, people who care deeply and passionately about justice in Palestine. So we want to take this moment to say how grateful we are to each and every person who has already made a donation in recent weeks and over the last year, especially to everyone who has signed up to become a monthly sustainer. Thank you on behalf of everyone at the Electronic Intifada for that. And one person who deserves particular thanks today is Jay, who lives here in the United States. She's made an extraordinarily generous pledge of $10,000 to support the Electronic Intifada's journalism in the coming year. Here's what Jay wrote us and gave us permission to share with you. The Electronic Intifada has a track record of steadfast commitment to Palestinian liberation. The EI live stream is where I turn every week for insightful analysis, inspiration for local organizing, and moral support. I read the articles every day. When I donate to the Electronic Intifada, I also know I'm helping to provide financial support for the courageous journalists on the ground in the midst of genocide who, as 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said, are storytellers for Palestine. And if you're watching today, Jay, I want to say thank you for those wonderful words and your incredibly generous matching pledge. And it is a matching pledge. Can we match her generous pledge by raising another $10,000 during this live stream? We haven't tried anything like this, not since my Pacifica radio days about a century ago. So Jay set us a really big task. And that's what we're going to try to do today. And that's where you come in. Please help us meet Jay's challenge in the next couple of hours. If you'd like to help, you can do so now by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking Donate Now. Or if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, there's a donation link in the description below the video. I think it's down there. Donations of any size are welcome from anywhere, and they're tax deductible as allowed by law for U.S. taxpayers. Of course, please, and Ali has said this before, please only make a donation if it is not going to cause any hardship to you or your loved ones. Your gift will help us pay all of our bills and support our writers, and it allows the information we produce to be shared all over the world, free of charge to everyone. If you haven't made a donation yet and you've been thinking about it, today is a chance to increase your impact. So if you can and want to take part in this matching challenge, go to electronicintifada.net and click on Donate Now. Or as I said, there is that link in the description below. I can't see, there we go, the YouTube or Rumble video. We'll update you on how we're doing throughout the program. And now we also want to give something back to our viewers as a gesture of our own gratitude and appreciation. So we have a few gifts that Ali and I will show you in a moment. If you make a donation, you will be automatically entered in a drawing to receive one of them. We'll pick names at random, and we'll do that after the show so it doesn't get too chaotic. But you don't have to make a donation to enter the drawing. So this is open to everyone, as I'll explain in a minute. But let's take a look at what we have. Ali, do you want to start?
Yes, and let me add my thanks to Jay for that incredible gift. Of course, that's fantastic. We don't expect people to be giving us $10,000 on this live stream. I mean, you can if you want to. We won't say no. But, you know, the point is, as many people who can participate as possible is what's important. And everything helps if you can spare it, because, you know, it helps to share the information. It helps to do what we do. So among the gifts we have are, we're going to have 10 copies. We talked about this wonderful book by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 last year, If I Must Die, Poetry and Prose, which was edited by his dear friend Yusuf al-Jamal. And so we're going to have 10 copies that we're going to give away in our drawing. We're going to have 10 copies of the memorial edition of Gaza Writes Back, which we also discussed last week with Yusuf and Helena Cobban. And since I wrote the forward, I'll even sign the copies. How about that? I mean, I'm not 𝐓𝐡𝐞, but my name's on the cover, so I'll sign the book too. And I don't have my copy with me, but we're going to have some copies of Asa's fantastic book, Weaponizing Anti-Semitism, how the Israel lobby brought down Jeremy Corbyn. And there it is. Asa's holding it up too. And we'll get Asa to sign those too. And then this is something very dear to my heart. Tamara, can you make me big so people can see this maximum size? This is the complete collector set of Electronic Intifada stickers. These are the whole collection. We started printing stickers in 2013. This is our very first sticker, and this is the one we did this year, which I've showed you before. It's our commemorative stamp for 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, and different designers have done these stickers. Margot Debaille, who is just wonderful. This one is by the British designer Moes. It's rather avant-garde. Yeah, but I think fantastic. But anyway, people will be jealous of you if you have the whole set, and so I'm very, very proud of that. So, and you have a few things too, Nora, don't you?
I do. I took myself and a friend on a little adventure around the Bay Area where I live a few days ago. And, everyone loves the Electronic Intifada and wanted to donate what they could. So we've got a couple of keffiyehs, one black, one red, made in... I think this is made in Nablus. These are made in Nablus, and they're being donated by the Middle East Children's Alliance and their Shop Palestine retail store that goes to support all of their projects that they've been doing for almost 35 years now in
Wonderful
Palestine
people,
and in
Middle East
refugee camps.
Children's
They're
Alliance.
very near and dear to my heart, and I know yours too, Ali. And so Ziad at Mecca gave us also notebooks. One has a really cool keffiyeh design. This one has an outline of Palestine. We've got Mecca 2025 calendars. A couple of these. These are beautiful. Part of
They
Mecca's
always commission such beautiful artwork.
incredible art. It's a huge part of their work.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
part of my
Yeah.
inspiration for when we started doing the stickers, because I loved
Yeah.
Mecca's artwork so much.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then Ziad also threw in these handmade bowls, I think for olives or for whatever you want. They're adorable, and they're made in Khalil. And there's a bunch of different pins. We have a bunch of pins: Free Palestine, Stand with Gaza. We also have, here's another one of those beautiful handmade bowls with a bunch of Free Palestine stickers. And then I went to Jaffa Coffee Roasters in Berkeley. Big fans of EI, and they are going to throw in a few bags of their hand roasted it's delicious. I love that place. It's beautiful inside, and they make their own coffee, and they're gonna donate some coffee and tote bags for our audience, which I'm really excited about.
And their coffee, I've had it. It's amazing. It tastes wonderful, especially their light roast. And we need a lot of coffee to keep going these days. But their artwork, the bags, I don't think we have them to show, but it's probably on the website of Jaffa Coffee Roasters in Berkeley.
Yeah.
Also
JaffaCoffee.com.
Beautiful, beautiful designs which show and celebrate Palestine and Jaffa in particular, where their family is from. So we're so grateful to them.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then Some friends of mine who run the Palestinian Soap Cooperative here in the Bay Area gave us 6 bars of Nabulsi soap. And yeah, they're from all over. There's like different designs on all of them. They're beautiful. It's like, Nabulsi soap is world famous, and it smells great, and it's perfect for, I guess, people do stocking stuffers. It might not get there in time for Christmas, but it'll be a really good way to ring in the new year with some beautiful soap. And just a little bit about the cooperative. They were founded in July 2021. The Palestinian Soap Cooperative is a Palestinian and American member-owned company seeking to make the Nablus soap the best soap in the world, inexpensive and widely accessible worldwide, and to do so in a way that spreads benefits among producers, retailers, and users, and embodies commitment to democracy. And you can check them out at palestiniansoap.coop. So yeah, we're so grateful for all of our friends. I mean, it's always, I hardly leave my house these days, but when I do, and I get to hang out with, people doing the incredible work that Mecca does, the Middle East Children's Alliance, Ziad, who's, the director at Mecca now, and I've known him for pretty much half my life. And they're doing essential work in Gaza. And I know that when Gaza is rebuilt, they'll be a major force in that rebuilding project. So to be there and to go to Jaffa Coffee and our friends at the Palestinian Soap Cooperative, everyone's just been so generous and so grateful for the work that we do and for the audience for keeping us going. And so we have a lot of gifts, and it's, as we said, like it's, as I used to say when I did these fundraising drives for KPFA, it's not about the gifts. It's about the movement, and it's about the support that this is like a collective effort to support the work that we do. And the gifts are just a really nice way to say thank you. So thank you for going to electronicintifada.net, clicking on the Donate Now link. You can also, there's a little ticker down there, bit.ly/EI-Kindful. And thank you for that. And again, we're doing a $10,000 match. So every dollar that you donate is doubled. And if you make a donation, you'll be automatically entered in the drawing for these gifts. But if you already made a donation, or if you just don't want to make a donation at all, if you can't, you are still eligible. This is open for everyone. Please send us an email to questions@electronicintifada.net. That's questions with an S at electronicintifada.net, and say you'd like to be included in the drawing. Again, there is no obligation to donate. If you can't or don't want to, that's totally fine. You are still eligible to enter to win these beautiful donated goodies. And if you're picked, we'll get in touch and ask you for a shipping address. And on that note, we want to be inclusive of people everywhere, but we may not be able to ship every type of item to every country, but we will try and do our best. And a final bit of fine print. This challenge and offer is only valid where it is permitted. If for any reason such things are prohibited where you live, then this is not intended for you. So let's see if we can match Jay's incredible pledge of $10,000 by raising another $10,000 or more during this live stream. If you can and want to help, you can do that now by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking Donate Now, or by clicking on the donation link in the description below the YouTube video for this live stream. Thank you so much to each and every one of you, especially to Jay, and we will check back in a little while, and Ali will give us an update on how we're doing with the challenge.
Yeah. Thank you, Nora.
Yeah. So
thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone. So we're going to do some questions and answers from our audience. Then we'll go to Jon for the resistance report, and then we'll have more questions and answers, because I know many of those questions might be generated from Jon's report. So let's start. Let's get it rolling. All right. So the first question, Ali, do you want to read this out and take it on?
First question is: has 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 left a legacy behind after he was killed? And this is an easy question. I might even give the first answer, an enormous one. And I think the quick answer is watch last week's show, because we had 𝐓𝐡's dear friend Yusuf al-Jamal, as I said, and Helena Cobban, also a dear friend of colleague of 𝐓𝐡's, to celebrate the books that are part of our giveaway today. I'll show them again. Gaza Writes Back, which was 𝐓𝐡's favorite book, first published in 2014 and reissued as a memorial edition. And John's holding up 𝐓𝐡's new book, If I Must Die, Poetry and Prose. And those are only a small part of his legacy, but they are an enormous contribution.
Yeah, thanks for that question. All right, next one. If there is a ceasefire in Gaza and the Rafah crossing reopens, do you think it's likely that people will still have to pay extortionate amounts of money to get out? And that is my main question. But also, if the head of the household is already outside Gaza, would that potentially make it easier to be able to evacuate his dependents without paying if there's a ceasefire? That's a really
and that question is from Heather, and the first question was from Yusuf. Just to point that out. Yeah.
Who wants to answer this one? The amount of money that before the Rafah crossing was closed by Israel and taken over and bombed in early May, it was possible to leave Gaza, but you had to pay just insane amounts of.
It was $5,000 per person to this Egyptian company that facilitates it. And it's basically an outrageous form of extortion that people were forced to pay. I mean, I think almost certainly yes, because I can't imagine
Egypt changing.
I mean,
why would they?
Yeah, that's it. But I mean, it would be fantastic if the Rafah crossing was open. So I suppose the answer is we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But at the moment, Rafah is not open. There has been, over the last couple of days, renewed, intensified talk of a ceasefire, where even Hamas put out a statement and said that, yes, we're definitely closer. But just a short time ago in the Israeli media, there were reports saying that Israel is now pouring cold water on that. So it's just hard to tell. And we know that people's hopes in Gaza were raised by all this talk of a ceasefire, but we'll see. We'll believe it when we see it.
Yeah. All right. Who wants to take on the next?
And this question is from Dominic. I guess I'll read it out, and then maybe John or Asa might want to answer. Elijah Magnia stated on the recent dispatches with Rania Khalek episode that Hezbollah could not act as effectively to deter Israel's aggression because many of the group's missile infrastructure was in Syria, which Bashar al-Assad denied them access to. Further, these have likely been destroyed by Israel in the recent mass bombing campaign on Syrian territory. Where does this leave the Lebanese resistance capacity to deter aggression on Lebanon and stand with Palestine? I think that's a very good question from Dominic. What do you think, John?
Yeah, there's no question it does. They had a lot of resources in Syria. Syria had missile factories, weapons factories. They were the overland shipping route for weapons parts into Hezbollah. I think it's important to note that Hezbollah is a broad and deep fighting group. Their ability to defend Lebanon is not confined to its missile capacity. They have significant capacity within the country. They have capabilities to develop the missile programs inside their own country as well. And their fighting force was proven very definitively in the ground war that Israel was unable to wage in Lebanon. So I think that there's no doubt that the destruction of Syrian sovereignty that we've been watching over the last however long it's been, a week, hundreds of airstrikes literally per day, destroying decades worth of military infrastructure in the country. You can't understate. You can't overstate the significance of that. It's a very important, devastating loss of sovereignty. But I would be very careful and cautious about declaring that impact on Hezbollah's ability to resist, because there are alternative ways to get those weapons supplies to Lebanon. There is already capacity within Lebanon, and it will simply force the group to look elsewhere. Because for the last 14 months, that hasn't been what's happening. It hasn't been missile shipments from Syria that armed Hezbollah during this battle. Israel has had control, effective, I said last week, carte blanche on Syrian airspace. So practically for this battle that we've been watching for the past 14 months, the missile capacity hasn't been deeply influenced by Syria because Israel has been targeting it. So I think we should keep those things in mind. And the fighting groups, infrastructure is an important part of the group, but the group's fighting capabilities are the primary issue, and Hezbollah's are considerable and proven.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I don't know about the specifics of this particular claim that was made. I mean, I think there's a lot of, with the fallout of what's been happening in Syria, there's a lot of contradictory reports going out, some of which I think are totally fabricated. I'm not saying this one. I can't really comment on, but more specifically, there was one today from Turkish media, which I found completely incredible. But I think, for all the reasons that Jon outlined just there, there's no doubt that, what has happened in Syria was a blow. It was a blow to the axis of resistance. But at the same time, supply routes can be replaced. And if you just look, you can compare the situation in Gaza with the resistance in Gaza. There's been a lot of, it was a blow. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, there's a lot of very overblown claims being stated right now online that, this is the end of the axis of resistance, it's the end of resistance, and so on and so forth. I think that is very far from the truth. That Gaza is under far more of a siege than Lebanon, right? It's far more isolated than Lebanon, and yet Gaza still continues to resist, militarily. And as Jon has pointed out, and as Jon has demonstrated week after week, they're even still manufacturing new weapons. They still have the capacity to manufacture Yasin 105s, for example. And I saw a report today, a credible report, that they're still recruiting new fighters. So, I think resistance will continue.
All right.
Okay, thanks for that question. How do people have access to money to pay the horrific black market prices? Certainly there aren't any banks left, and cash points won't be getting restocked either. Can the journalists on the ground even access any money they are earning through their reporting? Yeah, Ali, I know you can answer this question.
Yeah, that's a really important question from Natalie. Thank you, Natalie. And it's one that's also very important to us, because we determined to keep supporting our writers. And the answer that I can give you is this: we are still able to send payments to people through the formal banking system. The banks in Palestine are connected to the international financial system, IBAN and SWIFT and things like that. So we can still transfer money to them. But you're right. The question is, how do you get your money out of the bank, given that there are really no operating bank branches in Gaza? There are no cash points, ATM machines. And so what we know is this, that people do have banking apps on their phones, and they can get access to the internet or the mobile network. And there are sort of informal money agents or money changers. And the way it works is, if you have $100 in your bank account and you want to get it out, you would transfer it through the app to one of these money changers, and they will give you your money. The catch is they charge very high commissions, sometimes as high as 30% is what we're being told. So your $100 turns into $70 in order to get it into cash. And of course, where those money agents get their cash from, well, it's wartime, and there's always informal markets and black markets and systems that crop up, and we don't know much about that, but that is what people tell us, how they are able to get their money. But it sometimes can be very difficult, but we are still to this point able to get it through to them, and we make sure to take account of that so that they are getting a decent amount of money, accounting for the types of commissions that unfortunately are being charged in order to get access. So to this day, we're still able to do it.
Yeah. And yeah, the black market for bags of flour, for just basic essential supplies. Our friends there talking, just months ago, I remember Abu Bakr talking about a bar of soap being an exorbitant price on the market. And this is like one more way that Israel is making life completely miserable by making this, forcing this scarcity, forcing a dependence economy that was already under a 17-year economic blockade, and then, under a genocide, under these conditions, in a hermetically sealed death camp. It's like unimaginable. And then having the extra pain of not being able to afford basic supplies to feed or clothe or, bathe your family.
Israel systematically targets the money changers too. Yeah. And so it sounds harsh.
It's
markups,
difficult,
but they are being targeted, and their entire businesses get wiped out. It's a very dangerous job to do. There's very difficult circumstances, but it's not strictly usury or exploitation.
Right.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, I'm not. They're providing a service that people desperately need, and that no one else is able to. And as you say, it's very dangerous. I'm not, I don't know who they are or what they're doing, but we do know that from the perspective of people we work with, it's a big hit. So we want to try to compensate for it. And the other thing people tell us is that sometimes you may have money and it's of no use because there's nothing available, or what you need isn't available. But in general, having money available is better than not having it. So we are still, making sure to get it there.
And it also reminds me that this is also happening in the occupied West Bank, where over the last 14 months, especially, Israeli forces have been going into money changing stores, especially in places like Ramallah, and just looting the money, coming away with millions and millions of shekels, and completely decimating local economies that way. It just they just keep getting away with it. There's no accountability for the outright theft upon theft upon theft of everything that Israel already has taken over the last almost 80 years. So anyway, let's go to a question from the comments. Okay, B. O'Donnell says, could you talk about the impact of Syria on the axis of resistance and how bad it is? Saw Scott Ritter yesterday, and his opinion is that there is little chance of a Palestinian state, no optimism. What do we think of people?
We kind of discussed the first part of that question, but I think we can address the part. I mean, many of us listen to and watch Scott Ritter, and he sometimes has some very interesting insights, and he has a lot of experience that gives him insights in a way that I might not have or others might not have. But I think he's been made, I think a lot of people feel a lot of doom and gloom about the situation, and that's understandable. But the Palestinians have been counted out many times, and remember before October 7th, which let's remember what October 7th was. It was a stunning Palestinian victory over the Israeli military. The Israeli military was defeated on October 7th, the southern division of the Israeli army. And just weeks before that, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor of Joe Biden, had been saying how everything's calm, everything's fine, the Middle East has never been so stable. And so they thought that they had destroyed the Palestinian resistance at that point. And I think that was wrong then, and it's completely wrong now. But I'd love to hear what others think.
Yeah, I think individuals should be careful to write off a resistance, like Ali said, that has, first of all, predated any of this analysis or the ability to deliver this analysis. This is a decades-old movement that has taken many forms, and there's moments moments that can look bleak. And I think it's a responsibility on commentators and pundits to connect and be accountable to the people that they're talking about. And just listening to Nora's news report, listening to the resistance report that's happening every single week, day in, day out, under the most difficult circumstances, Palestinians are courageously resisting, from the youngest children going to schools in back rooms of houses, from medical doctors putting back together the dismantled medical system. The resistance is not dying because of a dictator in another country being collapsed. The Palestinians have figured out how to battle inside a blockaded area for 20 plus years. The Syrians were not giving weapons to the Palestinians over the past 20 years. We need to be very honest and open about that. So we need to be, I just think as particularly from afar, commentators should be careful to not make those kind of distinctions that are separate from the population they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I agree with that. I mean, I think complementary to that, I would say is, I mean, it's kind of understandable that people are feeling a lot of doom and gloom, right? I mean, like I said before, it was a blow, and there's a lot of people living in the region who are feeling a lot of doom and gloom. But as was said, this is a struggle of more than 100 years. It didn't, as the slogan goes, didn't start on October 7th. It didn't even start on 1948. It started in the late 19th century, really. So you know, we have to be in this for the long haul. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Before,
All right. Oh, yeah.
before we go to the next question, let me just say a couple of thank yous. I mean, I'm going to come back to you with some hard numbers later in the show, but just to say thank you to everyone who's already been so generous and made a donation at electronicintifada.net or at the link in the description. And that includes Barbara, Paul, Adelmo, Thomas, Michael, Jeffrey, Maxwell, Susan, Greg, Bilal, Aisha, Sarah, Jan, Gia, Ryan, Mike, Jamie, Shahla, Laure, Melanie, Michaela, Erin, Helen, Nancy, Bettina, Shinar, Wendy, Hassan, Maggie, and many, many others. So thank you to all of you. And we'll give another update soon.
Yes, thank you. So let's take a couple more questions before we go to the resistance report and then come back for more questions and answers. Let's see. Gazella says, long live the resistance. Please, would you talk a bit about the Palestinian Authority, the PA, making deals with Israel and the U.S.? I think Tamara should come on and talk about it because she just published 2 brilliant reports about this very topic. Ali, John, especially John, you covered the attempted coup in Gaza by the PA, by the Fatah forces in 2006. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it connects to what we're seeing in the West Bank that Tamara brilliantly reported over the weekend?
Yeah, I think you should check out tomorrow's 2 articles for sure. I did cover the Fatah-Hamas battle, the attempt of the Palestinian Authority to overthrow the democratic election of Hamas, and it was some of the most dangerous work that I've ever done. It was a very crazy period in Gaza, and one I don't think people want back. And that's part of the sticking point on the ceasefire talks is the day after. There's no legitimacy for the Palestinian Authority. There's no legitimacy for the Palestinian Authority anywhere outside of this very small section of just outside of Ramallah, essentially, where their offices are. And even there, it's tenuous. This is not a popular organization, but I think we've talked about this on the program before with Abdul Jawad. It's important to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. The organization of the state are the right of the Palestinians, the garbage collection, the schools, the civil service. They're the right of the Palestinians. And after the Hamas election, the Palestinian Authority did not believe that it was the right of the Palestinian people to hold those organizations. So they undermined the medical system. They didn't go to work into the school system. And so they're a deeply unpopular collaborationist organization that acts at the behest of Israel. And at this point, I don't think that there's a kind thing that you could say or a nuanced thing you could say other than the institutions do not belong to them. They belong to Palestinians, and there needs to be elections, which the US and the West block because Hamas will win those elections. And certainly people associated with the Palestinian Authority, the Fatah-aligned Palestinian Authority, will certainly not win those elections. And that's why the elections don't happen.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about the Palestinian Authority before, but what they're doing now is, this is my word, and I think it's the correct word, is treason. When you are sending armed men to attack and kill resistance fighters on behalf of the occupation, which is what the PA is doing, that's treason. In every country, that's considered treason, collaboration with an occupation. In the Constitution of Sweden is always held up as, a model country. The Constitution of Sweden requires public officials to assist the resistance if the country falls under foreign military occupation. It's a constitutional requirement to assist the resistance. And what we have in the Palestinian Authority is they are assisting and working for the occupier. And while they have always done that, and they were founded to do that by Israel and the United States in the context of the Oslo Accords 30 years ago, there's an intensification now, and part of the timing, and Tamara mentions this in her excellent article, is it's an audition for Donald Trump. It's to show the new administration, we are good boys, we'll do whatever you tell us, we'll do what Israel wants of us, please fund us, please give us weapons. And as Tamara points out, the United States actually in recent days has asked Israel to transfer weapons to the Palestinian Authority and ammunition to help the Palestinian Authority kill and maim Palestinians to prevent them from resisting Israel. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Right.
And we need the Palestinian Authority. It does our job for us. Benjamin Netanyahu last year, he said that.
Yeah.
And it's why it's still there, because they could destroy it in a second if they wanted to, the Israelis, but they need it. They're ready to destroy UNRWA, but they keep the Palestinian Authority and supply it with ammunition.
Yeah.
I remember this must have been 2009, 2010. Jon, you were researching and investigating the Keith Dayton's army. Keith Dayton was a U.S. Marine, I believe, who was training Palestinian so-called security forces in Jordan. Can you talk a little bit about that, and kind of just in in a minute or two, talk about that and how 15, 16 years later, we're still seeing the effects of U.S. military training of Palestinian traders?
Yeah, well, the story of that goes that when Oslo was signed, fighters in the diaspora came home, and many of them joined the Palestinian Authority security forces, and they were not the collaborators, the open collaborators that they are in this generation. And the beginning of the Second Intifada, many of the PA security forces were at the beginning of the Second Intifada, turned their weapons on the Israelis, both during their joint patrols and also on the street protests that were shot at by the Israelis. And we saw in that report that you did from Tamara that one of those officers laid down his weapon in Jenin just last week. So Keith Dayton's role was to train a new generation of security forces that got rid of all of the old Palestinian Authority security forces that turned their guns on the Second Intifada and were part of Marwan Barghouti had the PA turn in their weapons, and those weapons were redistributed to fighters in the Second Intifada. And that was something that Israel, in destroying all of the institutions of the Palestinian Authority during the Second Intifada, they needed to rebuild security forces. And those security forces are US trained. They're trained in Jordan. And they're interestingly, they're deployed in cities they don't live in, because previous security forces were not effective in the cities if their families lived there and there was accountability to the community. So they moved the forces around to fight in Jenin. There's no one from Jenin fighting in the security forces in Jenin, which just shows you the level of collaboration that it is. They wear masks, which you can see in Jenin all the time. They're masked because they're hiding the fact that they're being treasonous. And the fact that they would go into Jenin after, on the heels of the many months of Israeli raids that destroyed the camp and really took a bite out of the resistance in those camps. And then to go in after that is just, it's deeply collaborationist. And the Palestinians, they want no part of them. There's a lot of video footage from Jenin of women and elders in the community coming out in the streets and literally physically blocking the PA security vehicles, banging on the windows, making sure people aren't inside being arrested, blocking them from getting into the camp. So Palestinians have made their feelings, especially in Jenin, clear about the Palestinian Authority's role with Israel.
Yeah. Thanks for that. All right. Let's go to the next question. Ali, do you want to read it?
Yeah, maybe we do one more and then we go to the resistance report. Then we'll come back and do some more questions. And this question is from Linda. What is the current situation regarding independent pro-Palestinian journalists and activists in the UK and Jersey who have been arrested and or had their homes raided by the British police? I think this is a question for, we'll direct at Asa. And of course, Asa, maybe you can give us an update on our friend Tony Greenstein too.
Yeah. Well, the situation in my case is essentially the same. There's not really any new updates compared to when we last talked about it, which is that, well, for those who don't know, my home was raided on the 17th of October and my devices were all seized, my phone and my computers and so forth. And it was done deliberately because I am a journalist that covers Palestine. And the police, it was so-called counter-terror police who did this. And they specified, I asked why this was being done. And the warrant they gave me said I was suspected of violating the 2006 Counter-Terror Act, and I questioned more what was it about, and the senior officer said it was related to social media posts I had made. So he didn't specify Twitter, but that's really the main social media platform I use. I asked which posts and he wouldn't say. So that's still the situation. I haven't had my devices back. I still haven't been charged. I wasn't actually arrested, technically. In theory, I could have left my house, perhaps, while they were searching it. I wasn't about to do that. So I wasn't arrested. I still, as of now, haven't been charged with anything. So we'll see. So I can't say too much about the legal side of things, but I can say what I said before, and it is still the case, is that my legal team are doing all their best to get my devices back and to protect my sources and to stop the police from searching my devices. So that's the situation. This is part of a wider crackdown by Keir Starmer's Labour government against pro-Palestinian activists, against journalists like myself who cover the issue of Palestine, and activists like our friend Tony Greenstein, who's an activist, a prominent blogger, very prolific blogger, author of the book Zionism During the Holocaust, which is a very good and detailed book about collaboration of the German Zionist movement with Nazi Germany in the 1930s and 1940s and across Europe as well. So it wasn't just the Labour government. The predecessor to them, the Tories, also began this crackdown, really, and Labour has really only intensified it. And while the Tories were still in power a year ago, Tony was... a similar thing happened to him. He was actually arrested, unlike myself, and he was actually charged. First of all, he was arrested under bail conditions that he couldn't even post to Twitter anymore. That was overturned. He had his devices seized and so forth, same as me. Similar thing happened to Mick Napier, an activist in very prominent activist in Scotland. And now the latest update is that tomorrow, as this is live, that is Thursday morning, Tony will appear in court and be formally charged with allegedly supporting a prescribed terrorist group due to tweets he has made. And I guess one more comment on this. I did see another comment in the chat which said something along the lines of, pointing out the fact that this week British diplomats from the Foreign Office met with Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, the new, what should we call him? The new strongman of Syria, the new de facto
the DEI hire, of Syria.
The new de facto leader of Syria, who seems to have been to be groomed to be the successor of Bashar al-Assad, it seems. British diplomats just met with him very openly and publicly, despite the fact that he is still, as of this broadcast, the leader of a prescribed terrorist organization according to British and American law. And so it just shows this whole terrorism classification is a complete political fiction. They make it up as they go along for whatever their own purposes. The questioner in the comments was asking, have they been arrested? Obviously asking very facetiously. The answer to that is no. But yeah, like this, that's happening while Tony Greenstein has to appear in court tomorrow for a tweet. Tweet, not even for meeting with Hamas, literally for a tweet. And Palestine Action activists are still having their doors rammed down, and they're still, facing very serious charges and potential prison time and so forth. One more thing, in theory, Tony Greenstein could face as much as 14 years in jail for this tweet. So I doubt that will happen, but we shall see. We'll be following very closely what happens.
Yeah. It's all, I mean, they're trying, obviously we know why they're doing this. They do the same in the US against activists and mostly students at this point who are speaking out and being very vocal about, the human rights that Palestinians should have. And, they want to make it politically and socially expensive. And a liability to speak out on behalf of Palestinians. As someone said, they can't fire us all. They can't put us all in jail. They might try. They might try, but we are stronger if we are a bigger movement and we don't capitulate to the, these decrees of silent, be silent and shut up and don't speak. So
that's right.
Yeah. Yep.
We have a question from a real friend of the show.
Oh,
Abu Bakr himself. And he says, just before you go to the resistance, I have a serious question that I'm baffled to answer. Why are you the most beautiful team in the world? Abu Bakr, we love you so much. That's all I can say.
I'm literally blushing.
We love you, and we pray for God to protect you and keep you. And we miss you, and we'll see you back on the show soon. Yeah. And then maybe you can answer the question. But
exactly,
you're the most beautiful Gaza correspondent there is, and more important than that, the most beautiful football commentator and sports journalist in the world.
Exactly.
That's my answer. Yeah.
We follow everything you do.
Absolutely.
I hope
we're obsessed with you, Abu
is aware of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And just before we go to the resistance, let me tell you, I'm trying to keep up here, but we've had already. I'm just like, we didn't know how this was going to go, but we've already had more than 200 people who have clicked on that donate now button at electronicintifada.net. And they include Rosemary, Lucy, Diane, Harry, Rukshinda, Heled, Ahmed, Andrea, Ava, Ramona, Mehmet, Bulent, people from all over the world. Thank you so much to each and every one of you, and to all the people I haven't named as well. We're equally grateful to you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And so we're going to go to Jon's report. Then we'll be back, as I said, with more questions and answers. If you're watching and you are struck with a curiosity about something that Jon is talking about, you can definitely put your question in the chat and we'll try to get to it. And we'll be back. Jon, take it away.
All right. Thanks a lot. We never miss the resistance report, no matter what the context of the show is. So I'm glad everybody is allowing me to do this, even though it doesn't. Nora and I feel an obligation to continue to always report this. The the resistance ability to continue to struggle makes it impossible for me to want to take a week off of reporting. And as every week, I want to just restate again that everything we're going to watch today has been published in the last 7 days since you last saw me. These videos are always all new. If there's ever an exception to that, as it was a couple weeks ago when I put all 3 of the Operation Avenging Sinwar operations together, because that's how Qassam intended them to be seen, I tell you. But otherwise, everything is from the week since you saw me last, and that is the case again this week. Just a couple things off the top. Is tomorrow? Are you ready tomorrow? We kind of threw this to you really quickly. Okay, great. Tomorrow's my key teammate here. We updated the maps a little bit thanks to Maxwell. This was a really devastating task. It was a simple question that Maxwell asked if we wanted the maps updated, and I felt like in this world of terrible things that we're witnessing every day, being asked to update the maps, like literally redraw the maps, hit me hard. But I think it's an important thing to do, and I appreciate Maxwell doing that for us. I want to just say about the civilians, Nora reported on that absolutely appalling study that 96% of kids believe that death is imminent. That's the goal of this war. The goal of the war is that people feel that way, that it's a punitive operation to punish the people of Gaza for supporting the resistance that dismantled the Gaza Division and Southern Command on October the 7th. And Israel's way of reaffirming to their people this institution that had been dismantled is to create this genocide that is happening every hour of every day now for 439 days. 90% of the population, I mentioned this last week, the World Health Organization has come up with a number. 90% of the population of Gaza is living in tents. So there's some other percentage of the population that are living in shelters, although Israel is systematically destroying those shelters. The Gaza Strip's civilian population has been literally decimated. 90% living in tents. And the U.S., this has been a joint U.S.-Israeli operation where the U.S. has given $23 billion just in this first 14 months to the Israeli military to carry out this operation in weaponry alone. That doesn't include their loan guarantees that they're going to get for their flagging economy or future weapons deals that were put through that will come to fruition in the years to come. $23 billion is just for the fighting in this 1 year. It's an absolutely disgusting statistic. This whole war has been shocking to watch, but the resistance has continued through all of this. There was some talk last week. I brought some new information about the ceasefire agreements. As Ali said, some water was thrown on that earlier today. The water that's thrown on it is Netanyahu not wanting a ceasefire agreement. If there's a ceasefire agreement, he has not destroyed the resistance. He has not brought back his captives. He has not made Gaza not a threat to Israel. All of the war aims that Netanyahu laid out, they have not been achieved. What has been achieved is the decimation of the civilian population of Gaza, the dismantling of their healthcare system, the dismantling of their education system, creating an environment where 96% of children think death is imminent. That has been achieved, and absolute destruction of the physical landscape of the Gaza Strip. So I just wanted to start with that. We can zoom in here on Rafah because we're going to start in Rafah again. The Israelis declared in August late August, early September. They started in mid-August saying that they had dismantled the Rafah Brigade. That's the Philadelphia corridor that you're looking at. One of the reasons why along the border with Egypt there, one of the reasons why people said, and Hamas was one of those people who said that there was some optimism for a ceasefire agreement, was because Israel had indicated that they were willing to pull out of the Philadelphia corridor, something that Netanyahu had been saying would not happen. And that was preventing the ceasefire agreement, because the Palestinians cannot accept a ceasefire agreement that involves having military positions inside of their already tiny besieged territory. No legitimate leadership of the Palestinian people can accept that. And so these ceasefire talks, what happens is they have a basic framework for them. And then right at the last minute, Netanyahu adds some kind of condition that the Palestinians can't accept to the deal that has already been made. And that's why you have Biden over the course of the summer speaking into his ice cream cone microphone saying that he believed that a deal was imminent, and that is because they did have a deal in place, and Netanyahu broke that deal by adding conditions that forced the Palestinians to accept the border there, the Philadelphia corridor, being a Israeli military corridor. And that is to go back to the questions that were asked earlier in the show. If the Israelis control that border crossing, there's no way for Palestinians to leave Gaza. Everybody, I think, that watches this show is aware that has been the case for many years, that that's the only exit for Palestinians to leave. And it's difficult enough. They pay bribes. Egypt is not a facilitator of them leaving the country. Israel has a veto over who leaves the country. Rifat knows that very well, as his scholarships and book tours were canceled by fiat, by the whims of the Israelis. So to have that military presence in that Philadelphia corridor is devastating, and it must be removed. So we're going to focus on the resistance. Tel Sultan in the top there is where Yahya Sinwar, the fighting commander, leader of Hamas and the Qassam brigades, was fighting in Tel Sultan, meeting with commanders from the Rafah brigade who was not dismantled. And then the Israelis beginning at the end of November started to move in militarily into the eastern section of Rafah again, and immediately they got operations. So let's take a look at number one here. This is part of, we saw last week, a series of operations that were called Operation Avenging Sinwar. Here we see a fighter, an archer, putting together his Yasin 105, and just gives you a good opportunity to see just how simple the weapon is and how usable it is. The fighter was adding the booster charge to the end, and that is what launches the weapon, and that's it. The weapon is ready to fire. He's got an elevated firing position here against a D9 armored bulldozer. Again, these bulldozers are destroying the infrastructure in Rafah, and targeting them has been a priority for the resistance of late, interestingly, because early in the war, they were actually passing on the bulldozers in order to hit the tanks and the troop carriers that had more people in them. I pointed that out early in the war, that they were saying, no, you could hear the spotter saying, no, don't, it's a bulldozer. And the bulldozer would pass, and then the APC would come and they would hit the APC. Well, later in the war, they have adjusted that, and they've been now hitting these D9s really hard. And that's something that's created a shortage in Israel. There was a story in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿, their leading newspaper in Israel, their leading tabloid daily, that talked about the delay in the arrival of shipments from Peoria, Illinois, of Caterpillar D9 armored bulldozers, and the need for these bulldozers to commit the genocide in Gaza has created a shortage. So you see the fighters The practical implications of the fighters targeting the D9s is seen in the Israeli media. These operations are in the Al-Janaina camp area in eastern Rafah. This operation that you're seeing today, he says, "Go ahead, hero," to the fighter. The cameraman comes in, and as the fighter's loading, he says, "Go ahead, hero." Something we've heard them say to each other throughout the war. During the battle, sets up in this window, elevated firing position right on the cockpit of the D9. And the D9 does not have rolled homogeneous armor. It has slat armor, and these are devastating hits. You'll see later in the show, I'll show you a video of a destroyed one. Number 2 is from December 6th. So this is from, it's taking them a few days to get these operations out of Rafah. Which is interesting. In the north, they're getting them out immediately. There's a tank-mounted machine gun fire in this track. Again, if people want to see the uncensored videos, you can see them on my Twitter. But these fighters are fighting in the middle of a battle space. These tanks are shooting, and that's why he takes cover there, because he's fired on. So he mouse holes up, takes a different route till he gets this elevated firing position on the same tank. And fires it. And just to keep in mind, this is day 427 of the battle. And the battle in Rafah began in May and has been carrying on with a small break, has been carrying on since then. So more than half of the war. Number 3 is also from this same operation. And this is an iconic one. This is going to be one of the shots that remains an iconic shot from the war. You can see the archers there just point blank in front of the tank, which is what these weapons are most effective for. Is they're small and light relative to other anti-tank weapons, and it allows you to get in close and shoot from there. Just the camera angle of seeing the Yasin, you can see it in the next clip. Yeah, let's watch it one more time. Just the Yasin, that's a $500 system. Qassam said that system is $500 from development, all through R&D, through testing, and through deploying on the battlefield at a cost of $500 per unit. And that's a $3 million to $4 million tank that's being hit from point blank range. It's an armor piercing shaped charge that will penetrate if hit right. Let's look at number 4 tomorrow, because I got a still. Yeah, you can see the still there. I think that we've seen a number. I've tried to point out a number of the iconic operations. This one is just remarkable. The distance to the tank. And in the Second Intifada, there was such famous pictures of children throwing stones at tanks and getting right up close to the tanks. And now this generation is doing it with the Yasin 105, which makes the weapon a very effective weapon because it's too close for the active protection system. You can see the active protection system on the upper right of the tank there. It does not deploy in that shot. So you get a lot of comments, but I don't know if they're bots or what, but saying, oh, the APS deployed on every single video you post, or I don't know if they get paid to do that, but it's clear the APS does not deploy on almost all of these. And when they do deploy, I point it out for you. Let's look at number 5. Again, these are the same operations in the Al-Janaina neighborhood, Al-Janaina camp in Rafah. These are 2 Yasin strikes against 2 tanks. The reason there's fighting in this neighborhood is because the tanks have pushed into this neighborhood. When they were based along the Philadelphia corridor, they weren't fighting because they were not in the city. As soon as they entered the urban built-up area, the Eastern Battalion of the Rafah Brigade, not only is the Rafah Brigade not dismantled, but the Eastern Battalion is the battalion that handles this section of the fight. So we're seeing the capability of this group to carry on a long-term battle of attrition. That's something that Abu Ubaidah pointed out on the 1-year anniversary of the war back in October, that they are prepared for a long war. Yahya Sinwar said that too before he passed, that they have been built to withstand a long war. They have lost fighters. The war has been costly for the Qassam brigades. It's been costly for the Palestinian population. It's been costly for the Israeli military, and it's been costly for Israeli civilians. The war is devastating. There's no understating that. But the ability of the group to fight is not in question at all. And I'm following this every day, as you know. The indications of their ability to continue fighting are all through this package that I have today and every week. They're seeing the Eastern Battalion operate. We're not just seeing who's left in Rafah fighting. That's the actual Eastern Battalion would be who met them immediately. So that's the resistance report from Rafah. We'll take a look at Netzarim here and take a look at the corridor that we've updated the width of the corridor and through Dar al-Bala on there, where our good friend our key reporter reports from, and the Nusrat camp, which is one of the areas that has been targeted with airstrikes recently. And the Netzarim corridor is expanded. It's difficult to say exactly how wide the corridor will ultimately be, because the destruction is so total on the south and north sides of the corridor that it's difficult to see what Israel will hold and what is just destruction. But though the destruction is total in that area of the map, it spans more than 7 kilometers wide right now. There's more than a dozen Israeli military outposts, which are basic rudimentary buildings built out of cinder blocks and corrugated metal. They're not building like a shopping mall. It's very rudimentary outpost, military outpost type positions along the border. But the goal is for Israel to cut the territory in half so that when people move back to the north, that they will go through an Israeli checkpoint in the Netzarim corridor. The Netzarim corridor that has been cut off here. I remember on October 9th telling this show that the Netzarim corridor would probably be cut off because it is an area that historically was, and that since the 1970s Five-Finger Plan, the Netzarim corridor was a spot where there wasn't much buildup of Palestinian. I mean, they demolished more than 2,000 homes to make this corridor, but this corridor matches to an Israeli settlement that existed in Gaza before 2005 when the Israelis left. And so it's logical that they would take this corridor, and they have. And this corridor is also a famous junction that Palestinians had to cross, because you can see the line running up right through the middle of the Netzarim corridor there. That's the Salahadin Road. That's the interior highway that connects the Gaza Strip. And so when the Netzarim settlement existed there would be conflict. That would be a point of friction between the Israelis and the Palestinian society. So the Second Intifada in many ways began at the Netzarim corridor after it began at Al-Aqsa Mosque, when Ariel Sharon marched on Al-Aqsa Mosque. But the Palestinians in Gaza, the uprising started in the Netzarim corridor when Mohammed al-Dura was famously shot in the arms of his father by the Israelis. That was at Netzarim corridor, a constant flashpoint for many generations of Palestinians. So that has been updated. If we look at number 7, this is something that we talked. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is Jabalia, actually. This is a photo from Jabalia. Yeah, let's go back to that when we get to Jabalia. So this is the sniper class. This says sniper graduate class of 2024. This is Soraya Al-Quds. You can see the soldiers. Again, we have to edit this video. If you want to watch the full thing, you see it on my Twitter. But this is interesting because it's Soraya Al-Quds showing us that these are the new recruits, that they are training the new recruits. We've seen a number of these operations. I pointed them out to you, and it's obvious that these groups are recruiting. People want to join the fight. They've watched them heroically defend their territory for 14 months now. They want to join the groups. And so Netanyahu claims, he made the claim late last week, that they had killed 20,000 they call them terrorists. But there's no proof at all for that number at all. No proof. Mostly Netanyahu wants to keep the number. They try to keep the number to be 1-to-1 civilian to combatant, because that's how they believe they're getting out of war crimes trials, by having that be the case. So we're seeing in this video new recruits training, and the spotter who's training him says, "Ready, Hunter, fire," and they fire and they hit him. And that's one of dozens of operations in the Netzarim corridor. So those soldiers that you see there are running through the Netzarim corridor. They're always going to be targets. If Israel intends to stay in the Netzarim corridor, they will be constantly targeted and constantly killed. And if we look at number 8, this is what is going on every single day. Joint operations. This is a joint operation between the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 and the PFLP, firing 120 millimeter mortars that they have gotten very good at aiming after these 14 months, because they can calibrate their fire from various positions, and you can see they're hitting their positions. Those are clearly the Israeli positions. Those are the cherry pickers that they've got, the cranes that they've got up there with their cameras on it, and they're clearly hitting these positions. They're killing soldiers in the corridor with artillery fire, and these are a daily occurrence. This is a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 and PFLP joint operations. That's how they calibrate with these are 107 millimeter rocket artillery, so that these are the main things. They use mortars and mortar bombs, and then they use these 107 millimeter rocket artillery, and there's many of them, and they can build those during the battle, so they'll never run out of those. So that is the Netzarim corridor consistently under fire. Now we'll go to Jabalia, where the main operations have been, of course, the brutal siege. Thanks to Maxwell for updating our map. We've got Jabalia camp here where people can see, and Beit Lahia is in the northwest. And early in the war, the place that the Israelis came in the early days of the war was down the coast. So the Israelis control the coastline to the west of Beit Lahia. So that has been a key part of their battle strategy. They usually come in from the east over through Shujaiya. Rifat talked about how Shujaiya was always a center of resistance because they're the closest to the border to the east. Well, this war, Israel changed it up and had a different strategy. They came down through the Netzarim corridor and pushed on Gaza City from the north. And then they came, rather than coming east and pushing into Shujaiya, where they expected stiff resistance, they moved over and came down the coastline from Beit Lahia. So the first battles were in Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia, but the second battles were in Tel El-Hawa on the coast there, which was surprising to me. That was their move, but they came across the corridor and up and attacked Gaza City from the south. And so these battles in Jabalia that we're going to see here, this one major operation takes place in the west of Jabalia because the Israelis control the coastline. So let's take a look at number 10, because that was the one we showed before. Yeah, here. Army Radio put this out, kind of without Israeli army radio, kind of without any comment. It's almost like they're proud of it. This is Jabalia before and Jabalia after. And I've shown you this of Rafah. We've shown you this of all places that Israel has occupied. It just physical erasure of the environment. It's absolutely disgusting and devastating that this is allowed to happen. And the accountability for these crimes has to be a priority for the international community going forward. We've watched on Israeli social media the glee, the absolute glee the soldiers have in destroying this landscape, brick by brick, house by house. And so I just wanted to show you that disgusting image, and I don't have any other word for it. And this is the other part that's horrifying. The aid flow, the 500 trucks a day is the siege level from before the war. That was the Gaza siege. If we were doing this show in 2021, we would be talking about the siege on Gaza and how products are not getting in. 500, there hasn't been more than 300 at any point in this war. And if you look down at December, You're seeing 0 aid shipments to the north. The north is Western Erez, and Gate 96. And you can see that none of those colors are in December. The north is not getting any aid, and there's days where there's no trucks at all getting into Gaza. They're starving the population. They're destroying the physical infrastructure, and that is the goal of the war: to terrorize the children, to starve them, and to starve their own people. And the military has pointed that out a number of times. But this has been 70 days now, 70 plus days of the siege of Jabalia, and this UN. The numbers from this graph are from UNRWA, from the UN Relief Works Agency, who manages the aid in Gaza. So I just wanted to give you that context. Now we're going to look at number 12 here, and I'm going to let you hear this fighter. There's audio in at the beginning of number 12 here that we're going to listen to.
محمود من زرد السلاسل وكل يا محمود من دم غير قاتل من ضحكة الأطفال من حزن الأرامل يا محمود مين محمود؟ محمود الخواجة مؤسس الجيش العسكري.
That's an incredible shot. So we've seen these fighters, we've seen them reading novels in position, waiting for the enemy. And he was singing, "You Come, Mahmoud." He's singing about Mahmoud Khawaja, who's an instrumental fighter. I'll tell you more about it after we watch this. So this is an EFP. This is 𝐄𝐥𝐞 𝐄𝐿's version of the Shawad, the explosively formed penetrator. They're on the street here. This video is incredible. You got to watch it on my Twitter with the sound, because they have made essentially a mini movie with this one. You can see the soldier's head sticking out of this tank here, and he's got his Yasin 105 out the window with an elevated firing position. We're going to see here in a second the hit on the tank that has separated the helmet from. We're showing this burning. This is 𝐄𝐥𝐞 𝐄𝐿 says this is the tank that was hit burning, and they show in this next shot here, you can see the helmet that was on that Israeli tanker is now on the ground after this operation. And then they're showing you here the positions that they're in. And this is interesting. This is a rifle grenade. This is an original weapon that Gaza used to use back in the earliest days of the armed struggle. It's a grenade that you put on the end of your rifle and fire it as a projectile, kind of as an artillery. But as we go back out and watch this one more time, I want to explain Mahmoud Khawaja and what they're singing. He's singing essentially a folk song. And the fighter, so his buddy says, "Who's that about?" And he says it's about Mahmoud Khawaja, he says he's the founder of the military jihad. And that's exactly what he was. In the early 1980s, Mahmoud Khawaja was singularly focused on armed struggle and getting the Islamic movement to join the armed struggle that at that time was led by the leftists and the PFLP and the nationalists. And he was inspired by the Iranian Revolution, as many were, to fight and to flip the order, to have liberation come before your Islamic State rather than build the Islamic State for liberation. And he used to get a lot of grief, Mahmoud Khawaja. He would be attacked in the mosques. He was attacked, but ultimately he convinced, his persistence convinced, and the Islamic Jihad fighters and their fighting spirit convinced, formed the nucleus of the armed struggle, which Hamas had to then essentially respond to Islamic Jihad and also form the Qassam Brigades, what became the Qassam Brigades. So this is really the nucleus of the armed struggle that this fighter in Jabalia is singing a folk song about, and the folk song is the eulogy from the assassination of Mahmoud Khawaja, and it was written by Ramadan Shalah, who was the late Secretary General of Islamic Jihad, and it's just a beautiful eulogy. He says, "You come, Muhammad, from the chains." Mahmoud, sorry. "You come, Mahmoud, from the chains. Mahmoud rises from our fighting blood, from the laughter of our children and the grief of our widows." It's just another part of the eulogy by Ramadan Shallah says, because he was assumed to be assassinated by the Israelis. It says, "You psychotic killer, just wait. My blood spilled will not write your victory. It engraves in stone my birth and your death. My spilled blood will not write your victory, Israel. It engraves in stone my birth, the birth of the armed struggle and the revolution, and it engraves your death." And what we're seeing here is fighters 2 generations later referring back to the foundations of the armed struggle in this, and it's a remarkable moment. Part of the eulogy says, "Mahmoud, you are the gun, you are the pen, you are the map, you are the flag, you are Palestine, and you flow, Mahmoud, from the tears of the refugee camp. You appear, Mahmoud, from our fighting spirit. You appear, Mahmoud, from the thirst and hunger of our prisoners, Mahmoud. You come. You've come from the chains of the prisons into the laughter of our children and the sorrow of our widows. You will always be there, Mahmoud." So that's from the early 1990s, and we have fighters in 2024 sitting in their battle position, waiting to carry out this operation, which is a remarkable operation to be carried out 70 days into the siege on Jabalia, and to just link it back to that struggle and to understand the history of that struggle and what Mahmoud Khawaja fought through to ultimately unify the Islamic movements. And he commanded some of the early operations with Yahya Ayash, who was the first bomb maker for Qassam. And they worked together, Islamic Jihad and Qassam worked together on operations that predate really the political organization of Hamas. That comes after. And that's an important thing to always note, because when we're talking about Hamas, the Hamas movement is a political movement in Gaza. Some people support Hamas, some people don't, like any government in any country. But the resistance movement, the Qassam brigades, are uniformly supported throughout Gaza. The fighters are seen as the heroes of their society. They're not seen as an arm of Hamas. They're seen as the Qassam brigades who fight for Palestine. If the government of Hamas were to be elected out of government, that would not change how people feel about the Qassam brigades and these fighters. And that story is just a remarkable story. And this next one is also a remarkable one, number 13. What we're going to see here is a Qassam operation in the Western Edge, and it says, "Monday, December 9th, 67 days into the brutal siege, Qassam carried out a qualitative operation, a tight ambush against enemy personnel in armored vehicles west of the Jabalia camp. They called this the Al-Fallujah ambush. It's in the Al-Fallujah neighborhood of west of Jabalia. And we see here the fighter looking on a closed circuit television again, and on the top of the table is the map, and he's planning out the operation. But on the whiteboard, it says 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Battalion. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was the first commander of Qassam. He was an operative. He was their spokesperson. He was their weapons maker. And they have named a special forces unit after him. On the board, it says, 𝐓𝐡𝐞, you're the father of zero distance. And it also says, we do not give up. We win or we die. And 𝐓𝐡𝐞's zero distance is, he was famous for operations primarily targeted against Israeli police and against collaborators. And the zero distance name comes from well-planned operations 𝐓𝐡𝐞 would carry out, where he would literally climb on the roof, on the hood of a car, and shoot a collaborator and take their guns. And the killing of collaborators was the key part of the early days of Hamas, of Qassam and Sarai al-Quds, because the collaborators were killing them, but also the collaborators had guns. And so you killed the collaborator and took their guns, and now the resistance movement had weapons that came from the Israelis. And here these are fighters praying. They're praying for the martyrs in the camp. They're praying for the wounded civilians in the camp and in Gaza in general. The fighters are always deeply connected to the people that they're defending, and that's part of their popularity. What we're looking at here is an operation that's going to be against an Israeli engineering unit that is leaving Gaza. They're going out on furlough. They have been in Gaza for 3 months. There you see them with their bags packed, ready to go home. On social media, they posted about how they were going home. And here they are being watched, getting in the back of a troop transporter truck. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 finds them with field reconnaissance. They point out, the commander says, because of field reconnaissance, they watched this and they got them. They got them in the back of that truck. I've edited these videos again so that they can stay online. You can watch the full video on my Twitter feed. But they got these guys. They fired on them. They fired a thermobaric Yasin strike against them. And this is the window that they're in, soldiers in a window still, 14 months on. And this was a very successful operation. They killed at least 3 of these special forces soldiers, and this is showing you the before and after. They're getting on to the truck. And from Army Radio, this is from Army Radio. According to the initial IDF probe, the incident took place this morning at an IDF encampment in Jabalia as the troops were getting ready to head out of the strip for a furlough, for a break. The troops were boarding a lightly armored truck using transport troop. They were boarding a lightly armored transport troop transporter. Sorry. When Hamas operatives launched anti-tank projectiles and opened fire on them. 3 soldiers were killed. 12 others were wounded seriously during the fighting. And 6 others were lightly wounded, including reservists from the Artillery Corps Sky Riders unit, which are in serious condition. The operation took the number of IDF soldiers admitted killed to over 40 in the Jabalia operation. So as you can see here, this is the fighters, the commander. They have the clothesline. They're able to CCTV watch the surveillance after 70 days of devastation in Jabalia. They're planning out the operation with this special forces unit. The 𝐓𝐻𝐿 battalion is a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 special forces unit. We've heard from them a few times during the war, but you can see they're all in tactical gear, ready to carry out this operation. And the story of 𝐓𝐻𝐿 is a really important one in the history of the resistance as well. He was born in Jabalia camp, so this is fighters in Jabalia saluting fighters from Jabalia, something we've seen all along. And 𝐻𝐻𝐿 was driven out of Majd al-Ashkelon, like most Gazawis, driven out of the Gaza envelope, what is now the Gaza envelope, like many other leading figures like Abu Ubaidah was from Majd as well. He was killed when he was 22 years old, but before dying at 22 years old, he became the first 𝐓𝐡𝐞 operative, a commander who carried out the nucleus of building the 𝐓𝐡 brigades from their youth movement. He was their spokesperson. He was the first person to be a spokesperson, and he wore his keffiyeh in a similar way and Abu Ubaidah wears it a bit tighter, but Abu Ubaidah has on a number of occasions worn it exactly the same way as 𝐓𝐻𝐿 did, as a salute to him. And you can see graffiti and paintings all over Gaza of 𝐓𝐻𝐿. Mahmoud al-Zahar, who's a senior leader, the senior most leader, political leader of Hamas, wrote a book about 𝐓𝐻𝐿. 𝐻𝐿 carried out something like 30 operations, killed 11 soldiers. Many times the Israelis lied about how many soldiers were killed. And so he was part of the Hezbollah generation of recording operations as proof of what happened. And like I said, they call him the father of zero distance because a number of his ambushes were well-prepared ambushes where he would literally jump on the trunk of a car, on the hood of a car, and carry out the execution of the collaborators. He targeted Shabak, the Israeli internal security. He targeted their soldiers. He targeted their prison guards. So just really well placed operations against the most repressive figures in the Gaza Strip. And that's how he got That's how he got so famous, was for those operations. And interestingly, he was sheltered in 𝐄𝐥𝐿, just down the road from where 𝐓𝐡𝐞 lived, with the Farhat family, and he would carry out his actions. Half the day he would carry out these operations, and the other half of the day he would dig a tunnel underneath the house. And he was, so in many ways, was the forebearer of the concept of the tunnels for the resistance fighters under, in this case, under Maryam Farhat's house. And ultimately, he was killed in 1993 after 2 years on the run. He was killed in a shootout in 𝐄𝐥𝐿 at that time, when he was caught in his tunnel by a collaborator. Collaborator turned him in. And that's why the Qassam Brigade's first units were anti-collaborator units, because the collaborators were playing a critical role in destroying the armed struggle. Israelis used those collaborators to devastating effect in those early years. And the trajectory of that is to today, where the collaborators are not a factor in Gaza anymore. We have one more. Number 14 is just from the rest of that video, which is showing the destroyed D9 bulldozers that I told you about earlier. There you can see what I described a couple weeks ago, what the cockpit looks like. The seats of the commander and the driver are at different levels, which makes it, those hits on the cockpit, that much more devastating. So you can see here, these are disabled vehicles, disabled tanks and D9 armored bulldozers. And at the end of the video, this is attached to the same video, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 operation, and it says, "We don't surrender or give up. We win or we die." And that's martyrdom or victory is the only, these fighters are not going to give up. And that's where it says that. So that is the resistance report from Rafah and Jabalia, day 439, still going, no signs of let up.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Jon. And I know we got a bunch of questions during that report. Maybe we can throw one or two up and have you answer them. I mean, just yeah, I think it's really important. I know that people are very appreciative of those videos, especially when the fighters are kind of reiterating over and over again that they're not surrendering, that the Palestinian fight for liberation is not, it's not going anywhere, and it's continuing. After 400 and almost 40 days of a genocide, they're not waving the white flags and.
No, and qualitative operations to hit that, those Israelis were in a fortified position that they believed was safe. They were guarded by 2 other units, and they were shocked when it happened. And just the history, I wish we had hours to talk about that history, but that history is incredible. And for the fact that, the guy is singing, and it's not staged, because he's singing that, the elegy to Mahmoud Khawaja, and the fighter that's right beside him says, like, "Who are you singing about? Like that song, who are you singing about?" And so it's not like, these are not staged. These are real moments of the fighters sitting, waiting to attack. And that's the whole nature of war. Hurry up and wait is the sort of way soldiers describe it. They spend most of their time sitting and waiting. And that's why the fighters put books. They always show novels. They're reading novels by Mahmoud al-Zahar or by other Hamas leaders or other famous books, or they're reading their manuals, or they're reading their field morals. They're reading those while they're waiting for hours and days and weeks to carry out their operation. So they're not. There was a Washington Post article that said there was pockets of fighters, which reminded me kind of Dick Cheney after the Iraq War, when, remnants.
Right.
This is not what that is. They're sitting in their positions reading books because that's their position. They're not running all over Gaza fighting.
I mean, actually, that's a good segue for a quick question. I know that Ali, you brought this up yesterday in our group chat, but the Washington Post had kind of insinuated that the U.S. believes that Hamas, that the fighters are, they're being kind of worn out. They're tired. They're on the verge of giving up or collapse.
That basically there's just a few
Right.
small pockets of resistance left,
Right.
and not
Right.
an organized military
Right.
structure. And I think what Jon is showing us is that that is not the case. But
Right.
we've heard that wishful thinking,
Right.
many times before.
Yeah. Incredible. Okay, let's go to a question from the audience.
Can I just, while we're pulling that up, I just want to thank people again.
Yeah.
While Jon was talking, we had an incredible number of people clicking that donate now button at electronicintifada.net, and we're so grateful. We've had during this show 200, actually more now, but at last count 297 gifts. We're grateful to every single person, including Zaima, Matthew, Anita, Christopher, Julius, Charles, Elias, Chowdhury, Joan, Bert, and Sammy. That's just to name a few. And I will come back in a little bit with the grand total of how much we raised towards that challenge to match that incredibly generous gift from Jay, that pledge of $10,000.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's go to a question. All right, I'll read it, and then Asa, I think this is directed to you. Let's see. Asa, you mentioned that the UN Human Rights Council published a report in June and that you thought they falsely accused Palestinians of committing war crimes on October 7th. Could you go more into that? Clearly, Palestinians did not behead babies or rape anyone, cut open pregnant women, or bake people in ovens. This atrocity propaganda has been clearly debunked by you all at EI and by others. But is there more atrocity propaganda that needs to be debunked 14 months later?
This is a good question. Well, I mean, I think to answer this, I'd have to investigate further and do another story. But I think, well, my point about this this particular report was that it was a case of false balance. You could, it wasn't. It was interesting because the context that I was talking about this was the story that I did, that we showed earlier on in the stream, the story that I did on the 7th of October this year for the first year anniversary of the launch of the Al-Aqsa flood operation, and debunking the fact that all of these Israelis were killed by Palestinian fighters, that the 1,100 or so Israelis that were killed on that day during that offensive, many of them were killed by Israel itself. That was the context of the article. And there was what this question is referring to is that there was 2 UN reports that were released at the same time in June this year, and they weren't particularly well covered. They were barely covered by the international media. I wouldn't say they were covered up exactly. There was a lot. There's a lot of things to cover in the news, but they were reported on briefly. But as I explained in the article, the idea was one of them was about Gaza, what the Israelis had done in Gaza, the war crimes that Israel has been doing in Gaza, and the other one was about allegedly what Hamas had done on the 7th of October. And so when these came out together, the way the international media covered it, to the extent that they covered it at all, and I gave the example in my article of the Guardian newspaper in Britain, the headline was, UN says that both Israel and Hamas have committed war crimes. So that was all they took from it. But what they failed to mention was, in the report about the 7th of October, it had all this evidence, as much as they tried to kind of dodge it, all this evidence of the Hannibal Directive, of the fact that Israel killed many of these Israelis on the 7th of October. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's still, we've done a lot to, and that article, in a sense, wasn't just my article. It was really the culmination of our reporting. I was getting into news sources, but I was bringing together a lot of our reporting from the year. So there's still a lot really to be said about it, I think.
Yeah, and there's also Human Rights Watch is coming out with a report on what the Palestinians alleged to have done on October 7th, and I'm going to be reading that very carefully to see if they recycle atrocity propaganda. They are good on some things, but on other things, you just have to read everything very carefully. That's all. So we'll be, if there is, we'll debunk it.
Yep, that's what we're good at. Okay, there was a question. Here we go. What are the best books or resources for understanding the historical evolution of Palestinian resistance factions in Gaza and the West Bank, Hamas, PIJ, PFLP, etc., including leadership, key players, and growth throughout the intifadas?
That's a great question, and Tamara gave me a heads up that it was coming. So while John was talking, I pulled some books off the shelf behind me. They're not just for display, and there's a few I can point to. I mean, if you want to go way back, our friend Helena Cobban, who we had last week, this book, this is let's see when this was published. I think it was published in the
I think it was 84.
84, the Palestine Liberation Organization.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. It's a soft paperback. So there we go. Tamara, maybe you can make me bigger so I can show these. Can we do that? Yeah, there we go. So the Palestine Liberation Organization, that's from 1984, so pre-Oslo, if you really want to go deep into the roots. And then if you think about the resistance today, which is more led by Hamas, you have a book by Azzam Tamimi, who is very close to the leaders of Hamas, Hamas, A History from Within. That's a really very rich book. This book is not bad. It's by Israeli authors, but it does also contain some interesting information. It's called The Palestinian Hamas by Shaul Mishal and Avraham Sella. I read it many years ago and I was surprised by, oh, wow, this is quite good. But it's been a few years, so don't, if you find something horrible in it, don't blame me. And there's also a book by, which I thought I'd pulled off, which I hadn't, by, I think it's Khalid Hrub, about Hamas, which is also another good book. It came out, I think, about a decade ago or something. And then this is a new book, also by Helena Cobban and Rami Khouri, and it's called Understanding Hamas and Why That Matters. And you'll remember, if you were watching a couple of months ago when we had Helena on, and she talked about the series of conversations they did on the web through her organization, Just World Educational, a series of in-depth interviews with, again, Azzam Tamimi is there, whose book I just showed you, Khalid Hrub, whose book I mentioned, Mu'in Rabbani, who's very knowledgeable, Jerome Gunning, who also has a book. I forget the title. I couldn't find it on the shelf now. And Paula Caridi. So all of those authors have books or articles, and then this book itself, which synthesizes those interviews. But of course, you can also go to the Just World Educational YouTube channel and watch some of those conversations that are synthesized in this book.
John, what about your bookshelf?
Well, those are some of the good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, see, these books, they're not just cardboard cutouts in the background. They're real books on there. It's not green screens.
No.
Yeah, Jean Filiu.
Oh, yeah.
Wrote a book on Gaza. I take off my desk jackets to make them useful. And then Eric Scary, he's written a couple books on Islamic Jihad. One that's just a collection of documents. So it's like a collection of just their documents. And Khalid Haroub did the same thing for Hamas. He wrote a book on Hamas in the 90s that primarily is based on the communiques that the group wrote. So those kind of books, I appreciate those books where you get it straight from the groups themselves. And yeah, the second Islamic Jihad book by Eric Scary. It's written. I don't know if it's written. These books are, I'm gonna have to put one together, but they're not necessarily focused directly on the resistance. They're usually focused on, like Eric Scary is a scholar of religion, so he focuses on the sort of the religious concepts. And the Khalid Haroub book talked a lot about governance, about the way that Hamas organized itself as a government.
And I just want to mention also, if you're interested in learning about Hezbollah, Amal Saad, who we've interviewed for the Electronic Intifada podcast, has a classic book on Hezbollah called Hezbollah Politics and Religion. I have it somewhere behind me, but I wasn't able to pull it up. But Amal Saad, Amal, and then last name Saad, Hezbollah Politics and Religion.
Yeah, I still recommend The Gun and the Olive Branch by David Hurst, which I can see on your shelf behind you, Ali.
It's a fantastic,
it's a classic.
That's a classic, broad history of the struggle in Palestine, and a really, really good book. I don't know where it is. I can't see it now, but it is a fantastic book. David Hurst. That's not the David Hurst who writes today, but I think this David Hurst passed away.
H-I-R-S-T. I think he's still around.
Is he? I hope so. I apologize if I said something that was.
But he's not as prolific as he once was. No, but he's written a couple of books.
David Hurst, H-I-R-S-T, The Gun and the Olive Branch.
It's very good on the history of the PLO and whatnot. Yeah, but it's a broad historical regional.
And that's great, because there's lots of people who are coming to this issue new, and they don't know where to start. So a book like David Hurst's is really a great way in.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, let's we're moving along here.
While we're pulling up a question, I'm just going to say thank you, Brenda, Janet, Maria, Jeffrey, Shah, Samaher, and Thania, among many others.
Wonderful.
And we're going to come back with that grand total in a little bit.
Amazing. Someone's asking for my recommendations, and they're very much overlapped with I think the Peter Filiu book, just called Gaza, was one of the best that I've read in the last 10 years for sure. So I underscore that one, and the David Hurst one as well. Okay. I'm curious about what is known, if anything, at this stage about the roles, formal or informal, of women in the various resistance factions in Gaza and the West Bank. I'm thinking about the current resistance formations, but would also love to hear a bit about the history of women in the resistance as well.
That's a great question from Megan.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I don't have facts or statistics on me, but I know that that women have always been a part of the resistance, formally or informally. John, you were just talking about, the women pouring into the streets of Jenin and defending their community against the traitorous PA security forces, and that is also a form of resistance, whether or not they're the ones holding the guns. But what can you say about women in historical Palestinian resistance?
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned Miriam Farhat. She
Yeah.
is from Shujaiya, and she is considered the mother of the martyrs. But in the first Intifada, before she was that, she sheltered Imad Akel while he was carrying out his operations, and then her sons all went on to play important roles in the Qassam brigades, in the weapons development, up to several of them died. I think she has 6 sons in total. I think she has 6 sons, 10 children. And she ran in the elections for Hamas. She was the 3rd person on their ballot, and she's famous all over Palestine for being the resistance family and sheltering. From sheltering fighters through to being a critically important part of the host of the meetings that were key to growing these groups. Women there's women cadre in the PFLP and the DFLP. There's not women cadre in the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 or Qassam, but that's normal of many armies. That their women are not on the front lines in armies. But of course, in history, the women have played a key role. Layla Khalid, who was, of course, a famous icon of the Palestinian struggle when trying to get prisoners out of prison. One of the tactics that was used was airline hijacking in order to exchange for prisoners. Layla Khalid, of course, played an important role in that. I think the cadre level, the leftists, they're not as large in Gaza as they once were. And I think a lot of leftists would end up joining groups like Qassam and 𝐓𝐴 𝐞𝐿 because of the capacity of those groups to fight. So I think that probably takes a bit of a chunk out of the women cadre that would fight. But of course, fighting is done on a multiplicity of levels.
Yep.
And the teachers, the doctors, the healthcare workers, the civil defense. There's women in the civil defense. All of those roles are equally, if not more important. And any fighter will tell you that. That those roles are more important to the struggle. So,
and there are dozens of Palestinian women among the political prisoners held in Israel's dungeons,
absolutely.
including among the leaders, Khalid al-Jarrar, who has been in so-called administrative detention for almost a year, and that's only the latest of her many detentions by Israeli authorities. So. The women are also part of the prisoners' struggle, a crucial part of the prisoners' struggle.
Every single struggle in the Palestinian liberation struggle itself. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. All right, a couple more. Let's see here. Someone had a question that came up about the Yassin 105. I know the DPRK provided the RPG design with the red band to the resistance forces, but I found something in a DPRK video that really surprised me with what looks like the Yassin 105 in footage from probably 2017 to 2018. My question is, did the resistance also get their design of the Yassin from the DPRK? Did the DPRK get this design from the Yassin? I thought the Yassin was unveiled in 2023. I'm very curious and wanted to ask because seeing this surprised me a lot.
Yes. So yes, that's true. North Korean F7 fragmentation warheads were particular were a North Korean invention. If you're looking at the tandem chart on the right-hand side, those tandem charge, that's a PG-7BR, which is a Soviet weapon. And what the Qassam brigades have done, and surely the North Koreans have done as well, is clone that weapon. So that was an effective weapon, a tandem charge weapon that the Soviets made. And what Qassam has done is milled those themselves, that weapon. And so you'll see that weapon in many places. And the actual launcher, the 𝐓𝐴𝐶 launcher, there's a Chinese version that looks pretty similar. And that's actually the genius of the Palestinian resistance weapon manufacturing, is that they manufactured a weapon that already worked, and that was lightweight and easy to use from close distance, light so it could be carried away. And then they perfected how to clone that weapon using unexploded Israeli weapons to fill them. And so that's what you see, those fighters there in the picture on the bottom, that you can see that it looks like a 𝐓𝐴𝐶 head. That is the warhead, the Soviet warhead shape that they make. I'm sure China makes them as well. But instead of importing them and being dependent on the importation, the Qassam brigades developed their own indigenous weapons manufacturing to manufacture those weapons. They manufacture those rounds. They manufacture thermobaric warhead rounds that are the same. They manufacture hand grenades that are copies of other hand grenades. Their rockets are copies of Grad rockets that are from the Soviet Union. So that's the genius, is rather than reinventing the wheel, their engineers perfected the cloning process of the wheel.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Jon, and thanks, Max, for that question. Here's one. Oof, this is a heavy one. Was the Al-Aqsa flood a strategic mistake that has hurt the resistance and the struggle for Palestinian statehood more than it has helped? What changes need to be made to the resistance strategy to salvage the situation and improve its effectiveness against the Zionists going forward?
And that question is from, do we know who that one is from? Oh, that one is anonymous, but a very important question, one many people are asking. And if I can just say on that one,
please.
I think we have to be careful not to look at the snapshot in time. There have been incredible, amid this genocide, which is horrific, there have been incredible also highs and lows when Israel was on the verge of strategic defeat to then feeling that it was on top of the world. And now there's a lot of triumphalism in Israel because they're conquering new territories in Syria. Netanyahu this morning filmed himself on the top of Jebel al-Sheikh, Mount Haramoun, in the occupied Golan Heights, which Israel just expanded its occupation of. So it's easy to sort of feel that this moment in time tells us something, but we have to look at the Palestinian resistance started in the 1880s when the first Zionist settlers came to Palestine to take their land and start expelling them from their land. That was one of the first things Zionists did. Expulsion was always part of it. And they have never not resisted. And there have been ups and there have been downs and there have been moments when they have been written off. And it's easy to also, because we have to forget, and this is something that Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said many times in his speeches, that the resistance, whether you talk about Palestine or Lebanon or the resistance collectively, isn't just fighting against Israel. They're fighting against the United States and the whole of the West, who are providing it with everything. And so the fact that the resistance is, and it's often said, that for a guerrilla or resistance organization to win the war, all they have to do is not lose. And by that standard, the resistance already won a long time ago, because Israel still can't conquer Gaza. Yes, they can destroy. Yes, they can murder. Yes, they can kill. And that's not the only factor. You have to look at Israel's international standing, how it's collapsed, its economy, how it's collapsed, how the majority of the world is in solidarity with Palestinians. And we feel a lot of frustration that we don't see that solidarity translate into, fleets of warships heading to Gaza. But that's, but that's not how it works. These are historical struggles and processes, and they're not going to end, and they haven't even stopped. So I don't think, we can say, we're not the ones who are in a position to say it was a strategic mistake or not. I don't think it was by any standard when you look at how Israel was defeated on October 7th. Its entire calculations were changed. And Israel could not invade Lebanon. They just tried to invade Lebanon, and they failed. So I think we have to just not be too caught up in what a particular snapshot of time says and look at the broad sweep. There is no way the resistance is going to stop. It will take new forms and it will develop, but it's not going to stop. And I don't think Palestinians are going to give up and say, oh, well, we'll just accept Zionism. That's not happening.
Right. Right. I mean, there's always been finger wagging at the, different tactics that Palestinian resistance or Palestinian people in general use to fight against their occupier. And, on October 7th, there's a lot of, finger wagging. Oh, you should have done something, nonviolent. You should have, this was a huge strategic mistake. The last time Palestinians in Gaza had organized to hold nonviolent, according to Western standards, protests to demand their rights, their inalienable rights, they were gunned down by Israeli snipers during the Great March of Return. And Palestinians are not, their only way to resist in the eyes of Western liberals is just to surrender and die quietly, and that's not a choice the Palestinians.
And remember what Nelson Mandela wrote in his book, which is also on my shelf somewhere, The Long Walk to Freedom. It is always the oppressor and not the oppressed who determines the form of the struggle. That's so right. It is because the oppressor is violent that the oppressed ultimately have no choice but to resist with armed struggle. No, Palestinians would much prefer. Yahya Sinwar preferred nonviolent struggle. Yeah. Yahya Sinwar preferred nonviolent struggle and supported the Great March of Return, the nonviolent struggle. That's but right. Israel responded with military snipers murdering children and nurses and elderly people. So, people aren't just going to walk out into machine gun fire and be massacred unarmed. That's right.
All right, we have a question about Jordan. Let's go to that one. Is the question just the tweet? Let's see. All right, so I'll just read the tweet.
Oh, wow. I hadn't seen this.
Yeah. President-elect Donald Trump says he must prepare for the possibility that Israel will be forced to invade Jordan in the event of an attempted Islamic coup there. He said this during recent talks with Netanyahu, who reviewed the geopolitical situation. Both Trump and Netanyahu agreed that Iran, after suffering defeat in Syria and Lebanon, will now invest efforts in taking over Jordan. What level of fantasy is this?
Well, I let's talk about that. Here's the question, this is from Wasif, who says, how much merit is there to this? Is this the step that finally goes too far for the Zionists, especially given that Jordan has been a loyal vassal to the West? There are almost 12 million of us in Jordan, with 70% of that population being Palestinian. Should we be mentally preparing to be dragged into the fight? Is that becoming more of a reality? Is the Jordanian military even capable of a proper fight? So I think the key thing, I hadn't seen that statement by Trump. I think the key thing to remember regarding Jordan is that the Zionists have always considered Jordan to be either their land, and you see the maps of Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, which include the modern-day state of Jordan, either that or those who are willing to concede that land, they consider it to be the place to dump the Palestinians. And that is the danger in the years ahead, that if Israel feels it's gotten away with genocide in Gaza, it's already escalating its ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, that some kind of a war like this on such a pretext or otherwise could be the cover Israel uses to try to expel the population of the West Bank into Jordan. I'm not going to say, oh, that's, I can't put a percentage on it, but it's not a negligible risk, because this is what a lot of Israeli leaders and powerful Israelis think, that that's where the Palestinians should go.
Right.
And they see themselves in an existential struggle where they might try to do that. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean that they would succeed, but it is their intent. And one thing that I'll say, I want to not just try to do this briefly, is when Jordan signed its peace treaty with Israel in 1994, part of the motivation from the Jordanian perspective, I mean, we always think it's Israel trying to get recognition from the Arab states. That's the classic paradigm. But in the case of Jordan, it was Jordan trying to get recognition from Israel in a way, because of the Jordanian leadership's persistent existential fear that Israel wants to ultimately turn Jordan into the, quote, alternative homeland for the Palestinians. And so part of the survival strategy of Jordan has been to be the best student in the class, as our questioner put it, a loyal vassal of the West. But that only takes you so far when ultimately they're willing to dispose of you, because they want something more from you than just being yet another loyal vassal. When they see Jordan as having this special place as the, quote, alternative homeland. In that case, if that's the case, and that's what Israel's intent is, and perhaps the intent of the United States, then Jordan should be preparing for that. It should be preparing in every possible way to have sovereignty and the ability to defend itself against such a scheme. And that's what everyone in Jordan should be preparing for, because it's a defense of Palestine and defense of Jordan, because the schemes and plots against Jordan are not just about destroying Jordan, they're about ending Palestine. And so this has to be a unified struggle.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's from Wasif. Thank you, Wasif. All right, so this next question, given that the Zionist entity has completely and irrevocably revealed itself to be a child-murdering, genocidal death cult, how will principled resistance groups, especially armed groups, adapt to a post-ceasefire world that continues to look increasingly repressive and normalizing? And conversely, how will the entity's genocidal strategy likely change after their abject failure to defeat Hamas? That's from Karim. Thank you, Karim. Jon, can you assess the adaptability of armed groups in a post ceasefire world?
That's a difficult question. It's very difficult to see the day after and to know today what that day after is going to look like. If the day after looks like what the Israelis intend, to have large military presence in the Netzarim corridor, presence in the buffer zone, ceiling in Gaza, and there's even, some nutters in the Israeli Knesset that want to resettle Gaza. If those dynamics remain, the resistance will be continuous and it will be aimed at those positions. They're not
Just
going
like it
to
was
lay,
before 2005.
exactly. They're
Right.
not going to lay down their weapons and allow the settlement project to take place. So if the ceasefire negotiations involve a complete withdrawal of the Israelis from the territory, I think that you'll see the resistance regroup, and depending on how the stage of reconstruction goes, I think you're going to find, with Netanyahu saying 20,000 fighters killed, there's no evidence for that, but I think you can very easily predict that there's going to be 20,000 new recruits for these fighting groups. So, and there's going to be an extreme amount of unexploded ordnance to restart their weapons development, manufacturing. They now have the expertise of their fighting. This is not the darkest day in the history of the Palestinian armed struggle at all, from my point of view. I think that there's another generation. This generation is skilled fighters that have urban warfare experience. They have manufacturing experience, and they understand the brutality of their enemy in a way that they maybe didn't before, because there's a generation in Gaza that didn't know Israeli presence inside Gaza, because if you're 18 or 20 years old, you were not living in Gaza during the settlements living in Gaza, existing in Gaza. So I think that as dark as a day as people may feel watching the genocide, which we all do, the resistance itself is not going to be defeated, and the post ceasefire, they'll be ready to fight again.
Ali, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree with John. I think that's quite right.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully, hopefully a post ceasefire world comes quickly and in the manner that upholds Palestinians' right to exist. All right, let's go. We have a few very short questions before we wrap. Asa mentioned the other week some bias issues he perceived with coverage from journalist Owen Jones. What are Asa's concerns, and who else does he feel is letting the side down? Name names, Asa.
How long do we have?
2 minutes or less.
Not long. No, and we don't. It's not personal. I mean, people have different approaches, and we don't want to
Yeah.
I have my differences with Owen Jones. He hasn't blocked me to get very granular, but yeah, Asa.
Well, I've written several articles about this, so that's really read those articles. Go search Electronic Intifada and Owen Jones and read our articles that he's done some in short, he's supported Zionism in the past. He's changed his tune over the last 15 months or so. But, Owen Jones is kind of renowned as a political flip-flopper and an opportunist. So it doesn't mean everything he does is bad by any means. I don't watch him. I haven't really watched him in the last year or so. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's diplomatic.
The articles by Asa, really the key criticism is that for many years, especially during the Corbyn era, Jeremy Corbyn, Owen Jones really allied himself with liberal Zionist groups that helped to bring down Jeremy Corbyn. I think that was the key damage he did, and how he did it is well documented in our articles. So
it's in the articles. It's in my book as well. But it's all there in the articles. If you search Owen Jones Electronic Intifada, you'll find all the details there. But that's.
And maybe he's changed his tune. Maybe he's seen the light. If so, wouldn't that be fantastic?
We all make mistakes, and we should then confront those mistakes and say I got it wrong, which he hasn't done, which is the issue that I have with him.
There's still time, Owen. Great. All right, let's go to the next question. What is the most optimistic outcome you dare to realistically dream of for Gaza as well as the rest of Palestine in the long term?
The liberation of Palestine. It's
yeah.
an easy one from 𝐄𝐥𝐿, wonderful one. I mean,
Thank
that's the outcome. The
Yeah.
liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. And liberation means an end to genocide, an end to apartheid, an end to military occupation, an end to claimed Jewish racial supremacy, and a country where everyone can live peacefully, fully, with their rights. The Zionists like to claim that calling for decolonization and democracy is like calling for genocide, but it's actually Zionism that's genocide. Palestinians want the opposite of genocide. They want liberation, freedom, safety, return, equality to come home. That's what I dare to realistically dream. That's something I firmly believe we will see. And that all these terrible, terrible, terrible sacrifices will not be for nothing. And that there will be a generation of children who will learn about the unbelievable sacrifices that their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents made to give them that life. And it's a debt that we will never be able to repay, but we will always honor.
That's beautifully said. Thanks, Ali. Oh my gosh, I might need my glasses for this one.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if I can do this without squinting too bad. This podcast has been a lifesaver. Jon's resistance reports are the only place I've gained any real information about what is going on the ground in Gaza. The guests are always fascinating and well worth listening to, and Ali and Nora's two-handed interviewing technique works so well. You're both extremely incisive interviewers, and being able to hear directly from Abu Bakr in Gaza is so very important to understand how people are coping during this genocide. Israel's suffocating siege has contributed to the appalling dehumanization of Palestinians in Gaza, and EI smashes that siege every day of the week. The Electronic Intifada has been crucial in investigating and debunking Israeli atrocity propaganda and bringing to light the truth about October 7th and the Hannibal Directive. Asa is a top-class investigative reporter. No wonder he has the establishment worried. I'm so grateful to you all for working so hard and in such difficult circumstances week after week. As activists, we have relied on EI for reliable, informative reporting, basically doing the only real journalism on Palestine in English, but it has been a tough year. So here's my question. What do you all do for downtime? Oh, that's a good question.
That's a good
Thank
question.
you for that. Thank you for that, Katie.
That's so lovely, Katie. And also, of course, we're very grateful to you for that comment. And we're also very grateful to all our writers, our contributors, Abu Bakr and so many others in Gaza, and our colleagues, Omar, Maureen, David, Michael, Tamara, of course, who's with us, Leah and Richard and others who help us in so many ways. They're all part of the EI team, and so are you. And so thank you for that. So what do we all do for downtime? Downtime, what's that? And what does that word mean? I'm going to search the dictionary.
What do you do, Jon?
Nothing. I only do this. So I hope you like it.
We love it, Jon.
No,
we love
Jon,
it.
you also follow hockey very closely.
I have a fantasy hockey team that's
true
doing quite
Canadian cultural spirit. Yeah.
I collect Legos.
Oh, you've got a little Lego Qassam fighter. That's not part of the prize giveaway.
No.
Maybe
it should be at some point.
It's the only one in the world.
Yeah.
Custom. Great. Ali, what do you do for downtime?
I like to go for walks and go camping. I'm a very, very simple person. If I can get out into nature and sometimes get away from the screens and the electronic devices for a little bit, it allows me to come back with more energy. And that's a really important thing, I have to say, that I've found that we do work a lot, we do work hard, but we do take breaks. We try to take breaks, and that is so important just to keep yourself energized. We wouldn't have been here for all these years doing this if we just burned ourselves out. So it's really important to allow yourself, whatever it may be that you enjoy doing with friends or by yourself, to do it so that you have that energy and that mental and physical health to keep going.
Yeah, it's important. Thanks. Asa, what do you do for downtime?
I do nerd stuff.
No way.
Yeah, I just I'm on the final volume of the 12-volume history of Middle Earth. I'm not even joking.
That's you'll have to do like a book report afterwards and tell us the highlights.
It's like, it helps me just switch off.
Yeah, that's important. That's great. And for me, I just got a kitten yesterday. So
that's the first we hear of this.
I know, this is breaking news.
Nora,
breaking news. I got a
The
kitten.
kitten is your hobby.
Yeah, the kitten's my hobby. I have 2 other cats, so we're now a 3-cat household. Which, you know, I don't know, no judgment, but taking care of animals and people is my downtime. I have 2 great kids, and you know, and then these 3 cats. One of them is the kitten is like ridiculously cute. I'll bring him on maybe the next live stream just to say hi, and I started crocheting. So, you know, keeping your mind and your hands busy, I think is also really important, and walks, obviously.
Yeah, we love
Hockey,
seeing your
books.
crocheting, Nora, in our meetings. It's,
I make scarves
awesome.
that just get longer and longer and longer. It's good. It keeps me from falling apart. So thank you for that question again, Katie. That's really sweet. And yes,
I think
Katie also told us what she does for downtime. Hold on. She said, for me, I walk my dogs every day, and in the summer I swim in the sea near a home in Hastings, UK. I like to dance too. Going crazy on the dance floor really helps me to lose myself. So yeah, letting it all out.
Katie.
That's Katie. saying
Katie
that.
from
Yeah.
Hastings. Hi, Katie. Hi.
Yeah, I've been
That
to
Katie.
I've been to Hastings. It's a lovely town on the seaside. So
It's great. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. And so I think is there one more, Tamara? Or is that, yeah, that's it. That's
before we
amazing.
go
I mean,
to
we had,
our
yeah. Okay. So, Ali, what's the total of how
all right,
much
so let me
you raised?
say, I've been keeping everyone in suspense, and I just want to, before I give you that incredible result, it's like waiting for an election result, isn't it? You're dying to know. I want to just say a few more thank yous to just a few of the 358 people who have made a donation by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking donate now to support our work in the year ahead, to support our writers, to keep us online, to help us with all the expenses we have. And I want to thank Britta, Jason, Cecilia, Alex, Asam, Kevin, Sarah, Ali, Nergis, Ben, Aisha, Bernd, Rachel, Joseph, Alan, Adim, Omar. I would love to read all your names and just to say thank you so much to each and every person. Are we ready now for the grand total?
I think
Okay,
so.
so remember, Jamila is another person who I want to thank here, and Ben and Kevin and David and Sue. The names keep coming in, so that's why I'm just reading more of them. I'm trying to read as many as I can. Joanna, Naushad, and John. So those just popped up on my screen, so I wanted to read them. So yeah, so our friend who pledged $10,000, challenged us to raise another $10,000 during one live stream. And I didn't know if we could do it. We've never tried to do anything this before, but here is the result. $25,178.35.
Wow.
So we
Thank
That's
you.
amazing.
turned Jay's $10,000 into $35,000 that's going to help us keep this coverage strong in
That's incredible.
2025. And so that is
Smashed it.
absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. I was
Thank
sitting
you.
here thinking of ways how I could like say, well, we didn't make our goal, but we can
tried hard.
we try. We more than doubled it. I'm so grateful to everyone. It's just absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, Jay, for your incredible generosity that inspired and motivated so many other people to take part, including, I see some of the names I see are people who've been supporting us for many, many, many years, and we're so grateful to each of you. But also, I'm seeing people who made a gift for the first time, and we are so delighted to have your support and to welcome you. And we can't do this without you. We're independent. We're not funded by any government. We don't have the sorts of major massive donors that other organizations may have. So if you think about that, that's $25,000, absolutely incredible, divided by, let's see, I've got my calculator up, 25,000 divided by, now it's showing me 361. So that's an average donation of just under $70, which shows you that this is really a grassroots operation. And that's what makes us strong. And we're just so grateful. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we're gonna do our draw. We're not going to do it now. We'll do that afterwards, and we'll get in touch with those of you who we pull out. We'll try to do as many of the sticker sets and other things as possible, so that we can try to say thank you to as many people as we can. And
again, you can enter the drawing either by donating or just sending an email. You don't have to donate, at questions@electronicintifada.net, and you'll be automatically entered.
Yes. And one thing that people have asked us repeatedly, I feel like this is a serious issue I should address, which is people keep asking us if we will have Electronic Intifada merchandise, hoodies and T-shirts and things like that. And my answer is we did in the past, many, many years ago. And people keep asking us, so we don't have anything in the works, but as soon as we get a chance to catch our breath, we'll look at that again and see if we can do something, just because people do keep asking us, and they want ways, people looking for ways to share, to advertise the Electronic Intifada, which is fantastic. So we don't have anything yet, but we'll look into it.
Yeah. And I think I sent a photo to you, Tamara, that we can show. This is this is to say thank you for meeting and exceeding our fundraising goal. Hopefully we can put that up there. I'm just blown away that, I shouldn't be surprised that our audience loves and respects us so much, and they're willing to help keep us going and vital. This is our little baby. He doesn't have a name yet, but this is the kitten.
Adorable.
Yeah, he's very small, and he has little tiny toe beans. And we're thinking of like a good, strong, but gentle name for him, because that's what he is. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that. Thanks, Tamara.
Thank
I
you,
think
everyone.
that's it.
It's extraordinary. And it's like I just want to say, we feel an extraordinary sense of honor and responsibility that people trust us to do this work. And we will always do our best to earn and retain that trust and to keep doing this. and we will be here. We've been here for 439. Well, the live stream has been here for 439 days. The Electronic Intifada has been here for 20 years, more than 20 years,
23
20
now.
some years.
24.
And I look forward to the day when we no longer need to do this. That will be the happiest day of my life, and it can't come soon enough. But until that day, we will be here.
That's right. Thank you all. Thank you, Tamara. Extraordinary Tamara. I mean, not only putting the live stream together, but also writing 2 incredibly well-researched reports about the 𝐄𝐥𝐿
And
this
there were
weekend.
so many questions that we couldn't even get to, but Tamara was so great because we're pulling questions from the email, from the comments, from the different platforms.
Yeah.
And Tamara, you just do an incredible job with managing so much all at the same time.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who sent in questions. We couldn't get to them. Maybe this is something we'll do once in a while.
I think the people might want it.
Tell us in the comments if you want to see us do this again, do a question and answer session, and maybe we will.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to everybody at the Electronic Intifada. Thanks to Ellie for social media, Michael for fact checking, Maureen, Claire Murphy, our senior editor, everyone at EI, Tamara, Asa, Jon, Ali, and thank you all for making this possible. And we'll see you. We should say we're going to be off next week, but we're back on December 30th.
Yeah, with the holidays, because
right.
the next 2, Christmas and New Year, are on Wednesdays. But we'll be back on the 30th of December, which I think is a Monday.
Yeah.
So that's just irregular because of the various public holidays. So, but sign up for the email list. Go to electronicintifada.net and sign up for our email list, and you'll get a reminder.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in about 10 days, 12 days.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see you before the new year, but happy holidays and Merry Christmas and love to all of you.